What would happen if you stood face to face with one of the most brilliant minds of our time and tried to bring him down? Derek Harris had no doubt in his mind that he could embarrass Elon Musk in court. In fact, he was certain he could break him, expose him for the flawed, arrogant CEO that some people believed him to be. After all, Derek had been the rising star in the legal world for years. He had taken down billion-dollar companies, crushed competitors in the courtroom, and established himself as the one to beat. But this was different. This was Elon Musk. The phone call had come early on a Monday morning, as Derek was sipping his first cup of coffee, barely awake. His assistant, Kelly, had called him with the news. "Derek, you're not going to believe this," she had said, voice barely containing her excitement. "You've just been selected for the case against Elon Musk." At first, Derek thought she was joking. He'd heard the rumors, a high-profile lawsuit, accusations swirling around Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX, about defamation, unethical business practices, and secretive, high-stakes deals. Musk had a reputation that needed no introduction, and Derek had no doubt that winning this case would solidify his place in legal history. He chuckled, leaning back in his leather chair. "The Musk case? They want me to go up against him?" "Yes, Derek. They're sending you in. It's yours if you want it." Derek had no hesitation. He had already made a name for himself by challenging the unchallenged, taking on cases most lawyers wouldn't even consider. His reputation was built on the belief that no one, no matter how powerful, was beyond his reach. And Musk? Sure, the man had billions of dollars and a mind that seemed to be constantly thinking 5 steps ahead of everyone else. But that was exactly why Derek knew he could outsmart him. Elon Musk wasn't infallible. He was human, just like anyone else. The case was about a whistleblower from SpaceX, someone claiming that Musk had knowingly misled the public and violated corporate ethics. The media had already had a field day with the accusations. Musk had denied the claims publicly, of course. But the press had already painted him as the villain. Derek's mind raced. He was already forming his strategy. This wouldn't just be a lawsuit. This would be his chance to put Musk in his place, to publicly dismantle the persona of the billionaire genius. He was going to embarrass him in front of the entire world. And that was exactly what Derek needed. He had climbed the legal ladder quickly, but with every victory came a nagging emptiness. His success wasn't enough. He wanted more. He wanted to be remembered, to make a statement. He wanted the world to see him as the one who could topple giants. And Musk? Musk was the biggest giant out there. The next day, Derek sat at his desk, poring over the details of the case. Kelly had gathered the preliminary documents, the lawsuit, the whistleblower's statement, and Musk's response. There was a wealth of information, and Derek devoured it all, his eyes skimming over each page with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The more he read, the more he realized that Musk was a complex figure, a man who had made incredible achievements but was also no stranger to controversy. There were allegations of faulty products, misleading statements, and corporate greed, everything that could shake the public's faith in Musk's companies. But Derek wasn't concerned with the allegations themselves. He was focused on the man at the center of it all. Elon Musk wasn't just a CEO, he was a symbol, a living legend. People believed in him, and that belief made him untouchable. But Derek wasn't buying the hype. If Musk had flaws, Derek was going to exploit them. He leaned back in his chair and smirked. This was going to be good. The strategy was simple. Derek would attack Musk's credibility, paint him as a reckless, self-centered billionaire who didn't care about the little people. He would make Musk seem arrogant and out of touch. In the courtroom, Derek would exploit every misstep, every flaw in Musk's carefully constructed image. He would break him. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from his wife, "Lisa, dinner tonight? Or are you too busy taking down Musk?" Derek smiled. Lisa had always supported him, but there was an edge to her message. She didn't like how obsessed he'd become with his career lately. But Derek was too far in to care about that. This case was everything. He quickly typed back, "You know me. Gotta win this one. But I'll make it up to you later." The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from James, his best friend since college and a fellow attorney. James was always a grounding influence in Derek's life, offering advice and keeping him level-headed. "Don't get cocky. I know you're good, but Musk isn't your average target. He's a different animal." Derek shook his head and replied, "Relax, James. This is just another case. And I'm going to crush him. Don't worry." But deep down, Derek felt a flicker of doubt. James was right to some extent. Elon Musk wasn't just another arrogant CEO. He was an enigma, a figure that fascinated the world. And the pressure to bring him down was mounting. Derek tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, gnawing at the back of his mind. He couldn't afford to fail, not with everything at stake. That night, as he lay in bed, his thoughts kept returning to the same question: could he really bring down someone as untouchable as Elon Musk? It would be the greatest victory of his career. But it could also be his downfall if he wasn't careful. The next day, Derek arrived at the courthouse with a sense of purpose. He wasn't just walking into another courtroom, he was stepping into a battle for his legacy. The world would be watching. His first move was clear: he needed to hit hard, get under Musk's skin from the start. The courtroom was filled with reporters and cameras, their lenses trained on Musk, who sat at the defense table with a calm, almost indifferent expression. He wasn't rattled. Not yet. But Derek was determined to change that. As Derek stood to make his opening statement, he looked across the room at Musk, who met his gaze with an unsettling calmness. Musk had dealt with countless battles before. This wouldn't be easy. But Derek was ready. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Derek began, his voice strong, "we are here today to expose the truth about a man who has built an empire on lies. Elon Musk, the so-called genius, is not the visionary he wants the world to believe he is. He is a man who has no regard for the truth, and who has hidden his unethical practices behind a facade of innovation." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to hang in the air. "The truth will come to light in this courtroom, and Mr. Musk will have nowhere to hide." The tension in the room was palpable. Derek had fired the first shot, and there was no turning back now. As the trial began, Derek felt the rush of adrenaline. This was his moment. The stakes were high, but so was his confidence. He would tear Musk's world apart, piece by piece. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The real challenge was just around the corner. And Elon Musk was ready for him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Derek Harris wasn't born into privilege. He wasn't the son of a famous politician or a wealthy investor. He came from a working-class neighborhood in the outskirts of Chicago, where every day was a struggle to survive. His mother worked 2 jobs, his father was absent for most of his childhood, and there were more nights spent with an empty stomach than he cared to remember. But Derek was different, he was driven. From a young age, he had the mindset that he could escape the life his family had been condemned to. He'd watch the rich kids at school, the ones who never worried about paying for lunch or affording new clothes, and he made a promise to himself: "I'm going to be somebody." But ambition, while it could fuel a person's dreams, was also a double-edged sword. It made Derek resent his upbringing, pushing him to seek power, wealth, and influence in ways that often made him cold, calculated, and distant from those who tried to understand him. His passion for justice had started with a simple moment in high school. It wasn't some grand courtroom drama or a riveting speech he had heard from a lawyer. No, it was the day a classmate of his, Sam, got unjustly expelled for something he didn't do. The principal, a rigid, narrow-minded man, didn't listen to reason. Sam's fate had been sealed without question. But Derek was different. He wasn't about to stand by and let his friend be wronged. With the help of his high school debate coach, who had noticed his sharp tongue and logical thinking, Derek appealed the expulsion. It wasn't easy. He spent nights researching the school's policies, gathering evidence, and arguing his case with more passion than anyone had expected from a teenager. When the principal eventually reversed the decision, Derek's reputation as a force to be reckoned with was born. He was no longer just the quiet kid in the back of the class, he was the one who could stand up for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. By the time Derek graduated from law school, he was already an anomaly in the legal world. Young, ambitious, and willing to take on anyone, anywhere, at any cost. His first job at a prestigious firm came with its challenges, but Derek was always one step ahead. He read the law like a second language, dissecting statutes and precedents with ease. But it was his natural charisma and ability to read people that truly made him shine. He was a shark in a sea full of minnows. But for all his success, Derek's personal life remained a puzzle. His marriage to Lisa, a college sweetheart, had once been full of promise and love. They'd met in their freshman year, and Derek had always been able to lean on her when things got tough. She was steady, grounded, the kind of person who balanced out Derek's more reckless tendencies. But as Derek's career took off, the cracks in their relationship began to form. Lisa was a constant reminder of the life he had left behind, a life he was no longer content with. She wasn't driven the same way he was. She wanted stability, peace, a life outside the high-stakes world of corporate law. And while Derek once shared her dreams of a simple, fulfilled life, the allure of fame and success had slowly pulled him in a different direction. At home, their conversations were more strained than ever. Lisa had grown increasingly concerned about Derek's obsession with his cases. He would come home late, eyes glazed over, too focused on his next move to even engage with her. Their once carefree evenings were now filled with silence, punctuated only by the occasional, awkward attempt at conversation. "Derek, you can't keep living like this. You've already won. Why do you keep pushing so hard?" Lisa had said one evening, her voice thick with worry. But Derek didn't see it that way. To him, winning wasn't enough. The accolades, the promotions, the fame, they were all fleeting. What he wanted now was a legacy. He wanted to be remembered as the lawyer who didn't just play the game, he changed it. The only way to do that was to take on the biggest, most challenging cases out there. And so, when the opportunity to take down Elon Musk came knocking, Derek didn't hesitate. It was a chance of a lifetime, a chance to prove that he could not only outsmart a billionaire genius but also expose the flaws in the man who had captivated the world. Derek sat at his desk now, flipping through the pile of documents related to Musk's case. His thoughts kept drifting back to the first time he heard Musk's name, back when he was still trying to navigate law school, unsure of what kind of lawyer he wanted to be. Musk was already a household name then, a visionary known for creating electric cars and launching rockets into space. People either adored him for his boldness and innovation, or they feared his power and influence. But to Derek, Musk was just another person who had reached the top, and the higher they climbed, the harder they fell. It was one of those conversations he had with James, his old college friend, that had stuck with him. James, a more cautious and pragmatic lawyer, had always advised Derek to pick his battles wisely. James had often spoken about the limits of ambition, about how a lawyer's job was to represent their clients, not to seek personal glory. "You're playing with fire, Derek," James had said during a late-night call. "Musk isn't just a guy with a big company, he's a symbol. People believe in him. If you attack him, it's not just about the case anymore. You're going after everything he stands for." But Derek had dismissed James's concerns. He didn't care about what people thought of Musk, he only cared about one thing, winning. This wasn't about the case, it was about the statement he would make to the world. The courtroom was where Derek thrived, and he was determined that Musk's case would be no different. As he prepared, he thought about the consequences of this case. This was going to be more than just a fight for truth, it was a battle for his legacy. There was no going back. Derek had burned every bridge, alienated friends, and driven away the one person who had always believed in him. The realization hit him one morning as he was reviewing Musk's past controversies. Musk was no different from him. Both had fought to rise from obscurity to greatness. Both had sacrificed personal relationships in the name of success. And both were driven by the same desire, to be remembered. But Derek couldn't allow himself to be distracted by his own reflection. Musk had built something far larger than anything Derek had ever done. But Derek wasn't concerned about the size of Musk's empire, he was concerned about what would bring it crashing down. And now, that was his sole mission. The next day, as Derek stood in front of the judge, he was ready. He was about to take on the most powerful person he had ever faced, and he knew he had to give everything to win. His reputation depended on it. His future depended on it. As the gavel struck, Derek looked over at Musk, seated calmly at the defense table, and smiled. This was just the beginning. The first day of the trial had been a spectacle. Every journalist in the room, every camera trained on the defense and the prosecution, had their eyes on one thing, Elon Musk. And in that moment, Derek Harris couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This was his chance to shine. The world was watching. But as the days wore on, Derek quickly realized something that no one had warned him about. Elon Musk wasn't intimidated. Derek had expected Musk to show at least a flicker of vulnerability, a crack in the polished armor of the tech mogul that he could exploit. Instead, Musk was unfazed, almost annoyingly calm. He sat through every argument, every piece of evidence, with a look of detachment, as though nothing could shake him. The jury, however, was another story. They seemed intrigued, almost fascinated, by Musk. Derek couldn't blame them. After all, Musk was a legend, an inventor, a billionaire, a man who had done things most people could only dream about. But this wasn't about admiration. This was about the truth. And Derek wasn't going to let Musk's charm distract him. On the second day, Derek hammered at the core of the case. The whistleblower, a former SpaceX engineer, had claimed that Musk knowingly cut corners in order to push out a product that wasn't safe. Derek's job was to make it clear that Musk didn't just make a mistake, he had knowingly endangered lives to line his pockets. Derek's strategy was clear: paint Musk as a man willing to sacrifice anything for his vision, no matter the cost to those who believed in him. "Mr. Musk," Derek said in a sharp, cutting tone, turning his gaze toward the billionaire sitting just a few feet away, "you promised the world that your electric cars would revolutionize the industry. You promised that they were safer, cleaner, better for the environment. Yet, here we are, with evidence that you pushed your teams to bypass safety standards for the sake of speed and profits." Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him as he listened, seemingly unaffected by the accusation. "Objection, Your Honor," came the voice of Musk's lead attorney, Catherine Brooks, a seasoned lawyer who had been with Musk's team for years. "This is speculative. Mr. Musk has not made any such statements." The judge nodded, and Derek immediately refocused. He wasn't going to let a small setback derail him. He had to break through the facade. Derek brought out more evidence: internal emails, confidential memos, testimonies from former employees, and reports of safety violations swept under the rug. Each piece was carefully crafted to show that Musk's companies were more concerned with optics than ethics. But no matter how much evidence Derek piled up, Musk's demeanor remained unchanged. The more Derek dug, the more it felt like he was hitting a wall. Musk wasn't reacting to the accusations, wasn't showing the panic that Derek had been counting on. After a few days, Derek's frustration began to mount. He was used to opponents breaking down, cracking under pressure. But Musk was different. The man didn't even seem to sweat. That evening, Derek found himself pacing in his office. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial that would finally make Musk vulnerable. His mind raced through the trial, replaying every moment. But every time he tried to find a chink in Musk's armor, he kept coming up short. Derek needed a breakthrough. He needed a strategy that would make Musk react. But how? His phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "Hey, man. I've been following the case. You've got to rethink your approach. Musk's not playing by your rules. You've got to stop trying to break him and start figuring out why he's so calm." Derek stared at the text for a moment, his frustration bubbling to the surface. James didn't understand. He never did. Derek fired back a response, his fingers quickly typing, "You don't get it, James. I've been patient long enough. This guy's a fraud, and I'm going to show the world that he is." He hit send and tossed his phone onto his desk, glaring at the screen. But as he turned to look out the window, the weight of James's words began to sink in. Maybe he was going about this all wrong. Musk wasn't like anyone Derek had ever faced before. The following morning, Derek came into the courtroom with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just going to attack Musk anymore, he was going to understand him. He had to figure out what made Musk tick. Musk had arrived that morning with his usual composure. He wasn't flashy, didn't bother with unnecessary showmanship. Just quiet, confident, and in control. The contrast between Musk and Derek couldn't have been starker. Derek wore his ambition on his sleeve, his expensive suit, his sharp words, his need to be the best. Musk? He was a man of few words, preferring to let his actions speak louder than anything else. Derek's next move was subtle, but calculated. Rather than attacking Musk directly, he decided to question his motives. He brought in an expert witness, Dr. Rachel Adams, a former Tesla engineer who had worked closely with Musk during the early days of the company. Dr. Adams was there to speak about Musk's management style, his obsession with pushing limits, and his willingness to take risks that often bordered on the reckless. "Mr. Musk," Derek began, addressing the jury, "has built his empire on the idea of revolutionizing the future. But the question we must ask is, at what cost?" He turned toward Dr. Adams, asking her to explain the pressure Musk placed on his engineers. She described the long hours, the constant push to meet deadlines, and the overwhelming pressure to produce results at any cost. "Many times, I felt like the company was choosing profits over people," Dr. Adams said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Elon Musk would push us to get things done quickly, regardless of whether the product was ready for the market." The room grew tense. For the first time, it seemed like Musk's calm was beginning to waver. He didn't react, of course, but Derek could feel the shift in the room. The jury was listening now. The walls Musk had built around himself were starting to crack. And then, Derek made his move. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice steady as he turned to face the man himself. "Do you deny that you demanded that your engineers compromise safety standards to meet production deadlines?" Musk's eyes flickered for the briefest of moments. It was small. Almost imperceptible. But it was there. Derek saw it. That was the moment. That was the crack. The trial dragged on for another few days, but the tide was starting to turn in Derek's favor. Musk's defenses had become more erratic. His team was scrambling to control the narrative, trying to keep the damage from escalating. But Derek knew the battle was far from over. The real fight was coming, and it would be more intense than anything he had ever faced before. Musk had been silent for too long. And now, he was about to speak. And when he did, Derek would be ready. But for now, the conflict was far from resolved. The cracks in Musk's armor were just beginning to show, and Derek wasn't going to let up until they broke wide open. The days stretched on, and the trial began to feel like a relentless battle, a war of attrition. Derek could feel the pressure building with every passing moment. He wasn't used to being on the back foot, but with each move Musk made, it became clear that the real fight wasn't just about the law, it was about who could outlast the other. And so far, Elon Musk was proving to be far more resilient than Derek had anticipated. As the trial wore on, Derek found himself spending long nights in his office, poring over the evidence, searching for something, anything, that would give him the leverage he so desperately needed. But every lead, every potential weakness, seemed to slip through his fingers, as if Musk were untouchable. Musk's calmness was almost maddening. He had become an enigma, an unshakable figure who seemed completely impervious to the weight of the accusations against him. And yet, Derek knew that behind that calm, there was a storm, a secret that Musk was hiding. He had to find it. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Derek sat back in his chair, staring at the pile of documents in front of him. His mind was spinning, the pressure mounting. Lisa's words echoed in his head, but he shoved them aside. She had never understood what drove him. She didn't get that he wasn't just fighting for justice, he was fighting for everything. The respect he had always wanted, the legacy he desired, the proof that he was more than just a lawyer. That he could take on someone like Musk and come out on top. Suddenly, his eyes landed on a document buried at the bottom of the stack, an old interview with Elon Musk from years ago. It was a seemingly innocent conversation about Tesla's early days, about the trials and tribulations Musk faced while building the company. As Derek skimmed through the interview, one phrase caught his eye: "The thing about failure is that it's not a failure unless you give up. I never give up." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Musk had always been a man who thrived on defying the odds, a man who had never let failure define him. But that same determination, that refusal to ever give up, was exactly what made him dangerous. He had built his empire on resilience, on the belief that failure was just a stepping stone to success. And in that moment, Derek realized something that sent a chill down his spine. Musk wasn't just a businessman. He was a believer in his own invincibility. This was bigger than a case. This was a battle of wills. Derek wasn't just trying to expose Musk's flaws, he was trying to tear down the myth of Elon Musk. The man who could do no wrong. The man who was untouchable. Derek wasn't sure if he was ready for the kind of battle that would require, but he knew there was no turning back now. The following morning, as Derek entered the courtroom, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had experienced during the trial so far. Something had clicked inside him. It was time to stop trying to break Musk. It was time to show the world that he could be the one to break through Musk's carefully crafted image. And he knew exactly where to start. Derek called his next witness, a former SpaceX executive named Jacob Foster, who had worked closely with Musk during the early days of the company. Foster was the type of person who had seen the good, the bad, and the ugly side of Musk's leadership. He had been there when Musk pushed his team to the brink, demanding impossible results with no regard for their well-being. It wasn't about building the safest rocket, it was about getting to Mars faster than anyone else. Foster took the stand with a nervous energy that made Derek's heart race. This was it. This was the key to unraveling Musk's empire. Foster had lived through it all, and now he was ready to speak out. "Mr. Foster," Derek began, his voice steady and commanding. "Can you tell the court what it was like to work under Mr. Musk during the early days of SpaceX?" Foster hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable, but then nodded. "It was intense. Elon pushed us harder than anyone else I've ever worked with. We were working 80-hour weeks, sometimes longer. There was no room for error. If you made a mistake, you were out. And it didn't matter if you were dealing with life-or-death situations." Derek leaned in, his eyes locked on Musk, who was seated just a few feet away. "And did Mr. Musk ever pressure you to bypass safety measures to meet deadlines?" Foster swallowed hard. "Yes. There were times when he made it clear that speed was more important than caution. We were told to cut corners, to get things done faster, even if it meant compromising on safety." The room fell silent. For the first time, it seemed like Derek had struck a nerve. Musk's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. His fingers, which had been steepled in front of him, now twitched ever so slightly. Derek pressed on. "Mr. Foster, how did that make you feel, knowing that your work might put people's lives in danger?" Foster looked down, clearly struggling with the weight of his words. "It was terrifying. I didn't want to be part of something that could harm people. But I didn't have a choice. I had a family to feed, and SpaceX was my only option. Derek turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you're hearing is the truth. The man sitting before you, Elon Musk, may have built a billion-dollar empire, but at what cost? How many people had to suffer to make him the hero he is today? How many lives were put at risk so that he could fulfill his vision of becoming the world's greatest innovator? Musk's face hardened. His jaw clenched. He wasn't about to give in, not now, not ever. But Derek could feel it, the walls were crumbling. For the first time in the trial, Musk's carefully curated public persona was starting to unravel. Later that night, Derek sat alone in his office, staring at the evidence once more. He felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The case had shifted. It was no longer about the law, it was about the story he was telling the world. And the story he was telling was bigger than he had ever imagined. Elon Musk wasn't just a tech mogul, he was a symbol. And Derek knew that the most dangerous symbols were the ones that could be broken. But Derek also understood that symbols were powerful, and breaking one came with consequences. There was no going back now. He was playing with fire, and the blaze was only getting hotter. And yet, in this moment, Derek couldn't help but feel alive. This was what he had been waiting for, the climactic journey of his career, the moment when everything came together. He wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for legacy. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. For the first time in the trial, the sense of impending doom for Elon Musk was not just a vague feeling, it was tangible. Derek could see the flicker of doubt creeping into Musk's eyes, a crack in the fortress of self-assurance that had been so steadfast up until now. But it wasn't enough. The battle wasn't won yet, not by a long shot. Musk wasn't the kind of person who would go down without a fight. Derek knew that. Every calculated move he made in court, every piece of evidence he presented, was met with an equally calculated response from Musk's legal team. Catherine Brooks, the sharp lawyer who had represented Musk through thick and thin, was not about to let her client falter in front of the world. That afternoon, after a long, draining morning of testimonies and cross-examinations, it happened. The moment that would change everything. Derek had just finished questioning another one of Musk's former employees, a safety expert who had been forced out of Tesla after raising concerns about the company's practices. The expert had painted a damning picture of the company's safety culture, or rather, the lack of one. Musk was sitting there, silent, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked calm, collected, but the slight tension in his jaw betrayed the fact that he was listening intently. As Derek sat down, his thoughts raced. He knew he was close to a breakthrough, but he also knew that Musk wasn't going to give in easily. Derek needed something more, something big, something personal. That's when it happened. Catherine Brooks stood up, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Your Honor, I would like to request a short recess," she said, her tone polite but firm. "Mr. Musk would like to make a statement." Derek's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment that Musk would either double down on his defense or crack under the pressure. The judge looked at Musk, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Granted," the judge replied, and the room fell into a hushed silence. Derek watched as Musk stood up slowly, his towering figure commanding attention as he moved to the front of the courtroom. The cameras flashed, and all eyes were on him. There was something about the way Musk carried himself, his unflinching confidence, his unspoken belief in his own invincibility, that unsettled Derek. Musk cleared his throat before speaking, his voice calm and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am aware that many of you may have doubts about me, about my companies, and about the decisions I've made over the years. I understand that the accusations brought against me are serious. But I want you to understand something very clearly." He paused, scanning the room with a cold, calculating gaze. "I did not build SpaceX and Tesla to make money. I built them because I truly believe in the future of humanity. I built them because I believe in the impossible." He took a step forward, his voice growing firmer. I made mistakes, yes. But the choice I faced every day was not between being right and being wrong. It was between pushing forward or giving up. I chose to push forward because the stakes were too high. The world is facing challenges that demand radical innovation, and sometimes that means making difficult decisions. Decisions that other people might not understand, decisions that might look reckless in hindsight. But that was the price of progress. Derek felt his heart pound in his chest. There it was, the manifesto of Elon Musk. The man who had risked everything to build his empire, the visionary who believed that the ends justified the means. The man who, in his mind, could do no wrong because his vision for the future was so pure. Musk's eyes locked onto Derek's for the first time during his speech, and Derek felt an electric jolt run through him. There was something almost hypnotic about Musk's presence. The man had an aura, a charisma that was hard to ignore. It was clear that he believed every word he was saying. The room was still, everyone holding their breath as Musk finished speaking. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had shifted. The narrative had changed. Musk wasn't just a billionaire on trial for corporate negligence. He was a man who had sacrificed everything for the greater good, a visionary who had gone to battle with the world's most powerful forces to fulfill his dream. Derek's mind was racing. Musk had just turned the tables. He had taken the narrative and flipped it. Instead of defending himself as a businessman, he had framed himself as a martyr for the future of humanity. For a moment, Derek felt the ground slip beneath his feet. How could he compete with that? But then something clicked. Musk's words, as powerful as they were, weren't the whole truth. Derek had been waiting for a moment like this, a moment where Musk's bravado would expose something deeper. Something human. Later that night, Derek sat in his office, replaying Musk's statement over and over in his mind. He knew Musk had just pulled a masterstroke in the courtroom. The emotional appeal was powerful, it was the kind of rhetoric that had built Musk's empire. People didn't just buy into his companies, they bought into him. And now, Musk had turned the trial into a battle for the soul of humanity. Derek wasn't just fighting a billionaire anymore, he was fighting an idea. But Derek wasn't about to back down. He had his own weapons, his own story to tell. He had seen behind Musk's carefully curated mask. And now, he would make the world see it too. The next day, as Derek prepared for the next phase of the trial, he knew he had to go on the offensive. Musk had given him exactly what he needed, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the myth. Derek had one final question. One question that would strip away Musk's grandiose vision and expose the truth, the raw, unpolished truth. When he took the stand again, he was ready. This time, he wouldn't just attack Musk's business practices. This time, he was going to attack the very heart of his ideology. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the final days of the trial loomed ahead. Derek could feel the weight of the moment, every decision now carrying more significance than ever before. The battle lines had been drawn, but the final confrontation between him and Musk was still to come. Derek had learned a crucial lesson in the past few days: this trial was never just about the law, it was about who could control the narrative. And as much as Elon Musk had spun a web of grand ideals and emotional appeal, Derek knew it wasn't enough. He had to expose Musk for what he truly was, not a martyr for humanity, but a man who, like all of them, was flawed. A man who was capable of hurting others for the sake of his ambitions. And Derek was going to make sure that the world saw him for who he really was. The courtroom had taken on a new energy, the kind of electric tension that only comes when both sides know the end is near. Musk's defense team had been relentless, carefully chiseling away at Derek's case, finding loopholes and technicalities to create doubt. But Derek had anticipated this. He had expected Musk's team to fight dirty. What he didn't expect was how deeply Musk's influence had seeped into the very fabric of this case. The billionaire's charisma had captivated the jury, and it had made Derek's job infinitely harder. But Derek wasn't going to let this slide. His entire career had led to this point, the chance to take down the greatest titan of modern industry, a man who believed the rules didn't apply to him. He had learned Musk's game, and now it was time to change the rules. It was the final day of the trial, and the air in the courtroom felt thick with tension. Everyone knew this would be the turning point. Derek had already made his case. He had uncovered the cracks in Musk's empire, the dark side of the man who had carefully constructed a persona of invincibility. Now, it was time for the final blow. Derek called his last witness, Sophia Kim, a former engineer at Tesla who had worked under Musk during the development of the Model S. Sophia had left the company in protest after discovering a series of safety violations that had been brushed under the rug. Her testimony would be the one that put everything into perspective. If anyone could make Musk seem vulnerable, it was her. Sophia took the stand with a quiet strength. Derek had worked closely with her in the weeks leading up to the trial, carefully preparing her to deliver her testimony with the precision and honesty it required. She was nervous, but there was a fire in her eyes. This was her chance to expose the truth. "Ms. Kim," Derek began, his voice low and steady, "can you tell the jury about your experience working at Tesla, particularly regarding the safety protocols that were in place during your time there?" Sophia took a deep breath. "When I first joined Tesla, I was excited to be part of something groundbreaking. But as time went on, I began to notice that safety was not always the priority. There were times when I raised concerns about the quality of the batteries we were using, about the design flaws that could put drivers at risk. But each time, I was told to focus on hitting deadlines. I was told not to worry about it." Derek leaned forward, his voice pressing for more. "And who exactly told you this?" Sophia hesitated for a moment, then nodded toward Musk. "Mr. Musk himself, during a meeting with several engineers. He was very clear, safety was important, but not as important as speed. He wanted us to meet deadlines, no matter the cost." There was a collective gasp from the jury. Derek could feel the shift in the room, the weight of her words sinking in. Musk had always portrayed himself as a man who was willing to sacrifice for progress, but now, it seemed, that sacrifice came at the expense of human safety. "Mr. Musk," Derek continued, turning to face the defendant, "is it true that you prioritized speed over safety when making critical decisions at Tesla?" For the first time during the trial, Musk shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His usual composure faltered for just a fraction of a second. The jury was watching him closely, and for the first time, it seemed as though the mask he had so carefully constructed was starting to crack. Musk's defense team quickly intervened, but the damage was done. The idea that Musk had knowingly endangered lives for the sake of his vision had been planted. The seeds of doubt were now deeply rooted in the minds of the jurors. As the day drew to a close, Derek knew they were on the cusp of something monumental. He had presented the evidence, he had exposed the truth, and now, the jury was left with a decision that could change the course of history. But Derek wasn't about to take his foot off the gas. He had one last move to make, a final statement, something that would drive the point home and leave no room for doubt. He stood up, his heart racing, and made his way to the front of the courtroom, the eyes of everyone in the room fixed on him. "Members of the jury," Derek began, his voice calm but firm, "what we've seen here is not just a trial about business practices. This is a trial about accountability. It's about understanding that no one is above the law, no matter how powerful, no matter how successful. Elon Musk may have built an empire on the idea that he could do anything, that he was invincible. But we all know the truth, no one is invincible. And we are here today to hold him accountable for the lives that have been put at risk in the name of progress." Derek paused, letting the words hang in the air. He could feel the weight of his statement as it settled over the courtroom. "I know that some of you may admire Mr. Musk for what he's accomplished, his achievements are undeniable. But let me ask you this, at what cost? Is the price of innovation worth the risk to human lives? Is the future of humanity worth the sacrifice of those who were put in harm's way to make it happen? That is the question we face today." He turned to face the jury, his voice growing more resolute. "I am not asking you to destroy a man's reputation. I am asking you to deliver justice. To ensure that those who sacrifice the safety and well-being of others, no matter how noble their vision may be, face the consequences. That is the duty we all share. And that is the choice you must make. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as Derek returned to his seat. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He had just delivered his final blow. The rest was out of his hands. Now, it was up to the jury. But as Derek sat there, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just done more than win a case. He had exposed something bigger than Musk. He had exposed the fragility of the human condition, the flaw in the myth of invincibility that so many people, including Musk, clung to. And, for the first time in the trial, Derek allowed himself to feel something more than the pressure of winning. He felt hope. The hope that the truth could still win out. That accountability, no matter how uncomfortable, was the only thing that would truly set them all free. The days that followed were filled with anxious anticipation. The courtroom, once charged with the electricity of a trial, now seemed eerily still. The battle was over. All the cards had been laid out on the table, and now, it was in the hands of the jury. Derek had done everything in his power to expose Elon Musk's faults, to reveal the truth behind the glossy exterior of the billionaire entrepreneur, but now there was nothing left to do but wait. The silence in the days leading up to the verdict felt like a heavy fog pressing down on Derek's chest. He couldn't escape the weight of it, couldn't shake the nagging thought that no matter how carefully he had planned this case, no matter how many truths he had uncovered, the jury might still side with Musk. They might still fall under his spell, enchanted by his larger-than-life persona. Musk had built an empire not just with his intellect, but with his charisma, and that kind of influence was hard to break. Derek paced back and forth in his office, his mind racing through the events of the trial. He had exposed Musk's contradictions, his careless disregard for human safety, and his willingness to put profits ahead of people. Yet, something gnawed at him. What if the jury saw Musk the way the public saw him, untouchable, a genius who could do no wrong? What if the system itself was rigged to protect the powerful? His phone buzzed, dragging him from his thoughts. It was an alert from the courthouse. Jury has reached a verdict. Return to the courtroom immediately. His heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment of truth. Derek arrived at the courthouse with a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. The corridors felt unusually quiet as he walked toward the courtroom. He saw members of the press huddled in small groups, talking in hushed voices, cameras ready, anticipating the arrival of the man who had captured the public's attention for the past few weeks. Musk had not been seen much since the final arguments. His defense team had kept him behind the scenes, careful to protect their client from the public eye until the verdict was delivered. Derek didn't know what was worse, facing Musk's icy, calculating gaze one last time or standing in front of the jury, waiting for their decision on a case that had consumed him for months. As Derek entered the courtroom, he caught a glimpse of Musk sitting in the front row, flanked by his lawyers. Musk's eyes met his for a moment, and the billionaire gave him a slight nod. It wasn't a look of respect, but more of a recognition, acknowledging that the battle was over, and now the outcome was beyond either of their control. The judge took her seat, her gavel tapping against the wood to bring the room to order. The jury filed in, their expressions unreadable, each of them seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Derek could feel the tension mounting, the collective breath of the room held in suspense. The moment of reckoning was at hand. The judge turned to the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood, holding a piece of paper in his hand. He looked around the courtroom, his gaze sweeping over the audience before settling on Derek and Musk. The room fell into a deathly silence. Yes, Your Honor, the foreman said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the decision. We have reached a verdict. Derek's stomach twisted. His mind raced, replaying every moment of the trial, every piece of evidence. The hard work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, it all led to this. The judge nodded. Please read the verdict. The foreman cleared his throat before speaking again, his eyes scanning the paper in his hand. In the case of Derek Green versus Elon Musk, regarding the allegations of negligence, safety violations, and corporate misconduct, we, the jury, find the defendant, Mr. Elon Musk, guilty on all counts. For a split second, the room seemed to freeze. Derek's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the words, but they didn't seem real. He blinked, trying to comprehend the gravity of what had just been said. Guilty. The word echoed in his mind, drowning out everything else. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. He turned to look at Musk, who had gone pale, his usually unshakable demeanor cracked for the first time. The man who had built so much, who had convinced the world that he was infallible, was now facing the consequences of his actions. Derek felt an odd mixture of triumph and disbelief. He had won. They had won. The truth had prevailed, but it wasn't the victory he had imagined. It felt hollow, almost surreal. In the pit of his stomach, he wondered how much of this victory had come at the expense of his own humanity. Had he lost a part of himself along the way? The courtroom was immediately filled with murmurs, and reporters scrambled to get their cameras in place. Musk's legal team was already standing, moving quickly to confer with their client, who seemed momentarily stunned. The momentary shock quickly turned into frustration as Musk's attorneys began to argue with the judge about the severity of the verdict. Musk, his face rigid with anger, turned to Derek, his eyes burning with something akin to resentment. For the first time in the entire trial, there was no smile, no confidence. Only raw, unfiltered emotion. Derek stood still, allowing the moment to sink in. The jury had spoken, and there was no turning back now. The years of work, the mounting pressure, it had all led to this conclusion. The judge turned back to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would like to thank you for your service. You have performed a difficult task with great care and diligence. Derek stood there, his mind still reeling from the weight of the verdict. Elon Musk was guilty. The man who had changed the world, who had inspired millions, was now facing the consequences of his actions. But as the room erupted into chaos, with reporters clamoring for a statement from Musk and his legal team trying to shield him from the media frenzy, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that this trial, this victory, was only the beginning. There would be fallout. There would be consequences. And the world would now see Musk not as an untouchable god of Silicon Valley but as a man who had faltered, and would have to answer for it. In the aftermath of the trial, the world's eyes were on Elon Musk. The victory in court had made headlines, but it wasn't just about the trial anymore. The real question was what would come next. Would Musk's empire crumble? Would this be the beginning of the end for his reign of innovation and disruption? Or would he bounce back, stronger than ever, finding a way to turn the scandal into a new chapter in his storied career? For Derek, the answer didn't matter as much as it used to. The fight had been about more than winning. It had been about exposing the truth, about bringing justice for those whose voices had been silenced by ambition and power. And in that sense, the victory was complete. But for Musk, the battle was far from over. It had just begun. The weeks following the trial verdict were nothing short of a whirlwind. The world, still reeling from the unexpected outcome, was bombarded with headlines, social media posts, and debates over what it all meant. The trial had captivated the public's attention in ways no one anticipated, and now, with the verdict out in the open, every movement from both Derek and Musk was under intense scrutiny. Derek had anticipated some level of backlash. After all, taking on one of the most influential figures of the modern era came with consequences. But the sheer scale of the storm that followed took him by surprise. He was bombarded with requests for interviews, podcast appearances, and commentary from news outlets. Some praised him as a hero for standing up to a powerful titan of industry. Others, especially in the tech and entrepreneurial circles, vilified him. They accused him of attacking innovation and undermining the genius of someone like Musk, a man who had changed the world with his companies. But no matter the side of the argument, one thing was clear: Derek had made a name for himself, and not necessarily the way he had imagined. Musk, for his part, was nowhere to be seen. His legal team had issued a brief statement, expressing their intent to appeal the verdict. He had retreated into the shadows of his empire, seemingly untouchable despite the court's decision. Some speculated that he was in damage control mode, working behind the scenes to protect his brand, his companies, and his image. Others believed that this scandal was just a bump in the road for Musk, one he would eventually bounce back from. For Derek, the aftermath was far more complicated. The public praise felt good, but it also came with an uncomfortable realization: winning the case had not come without personal cost. He was constantly on edge, aware of how easily public opinion could turn against him. The media landscape had a tendency to devour people, whether they were on the right or wrong side of the issue. In the quiet moments, Derek found himself wrestling with the consequences of his own actions. Had he done the right thing? Had he made his mark for the right reasons? Was it justice he had pursued, or was it something more personal, a desire to see a man like Musk fall from the heights he had reached? It wasn't long before Derek was invited to a meeting with some high-profile attorneys and a prominent journalist from the New York Times who had been covering the case. They were eager to understand the psychological aspects of the trial, what had driven him to take on Musk, and what had kept him going through the toughest moments. Derek knew this was going to be one of those interviews that would be dissected and analyzed for weeks to come. As he sat across from the journalist, who had a pen poised above her notepad, Derek couldn't help but feel a pang of nervousness. This wasn't about the trial anymore. It was about who he was and what he represented. The stakes felt higher now, not just for him, but for the larger narrative of justice and ambition. "Mr. Green," the journalist began, her voice soft but direct. "What's next for you? Do you feel you've achieved what you set out to do in the trial? Or are you still struggling with the implications of what this case has done to your career, and to your life?" Derek thought for a moment before responding. "The trial, for me, was never about the fame. It wasn't about the headlines or the public attention. I went after Musk because I believed in holding people accountable, no matter who they were. But what I've learned in these past few weeks is that justice is a complicated thing. It's not just about proving a point. It's about how the world interprets that point. And sometimes, when you take down someone as powerful as Musk, it feels more like a personal battle than a moral victory." The journalist nodded, scribbling something down. "You're talking about the psychological toll of going after someone like him. Is it possible that Musk himself had no idea of the consequences of his actions? Or do you think he's fully aware of the dangers he posed to those working under him?" Derek paused again, his mind drifting back to the moments he'd spent cross-examining Musk in court. The billionaire had seemed detached, almost oblivious to the real-world consequences of his decisions. "Musk is brilliant," Derek said, his voice steady. "But sometimes, brilliance doesn't allow you to see the forest for the trees. I think he knows what he's doing, but I don't think he's ever truly had to answer for it. Until now, he's been shielded by his fame, his wealth, and his influence. That's the real danger. When someone gets so powerful that they believe they're above reproach, they stop seeing the people they hurt. And that's where I think we failed him. The system allowed him to get to this point." After the interview, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that the trial was just one chapter in a much larger story. His victory against Musk felt like a fleeting moment, a snapshot in a never-ending game of corporate power and influence. And as he sat in his office late that night, staring at the case files scattered across his desk, he wondered if anyone could truly take on a figure like Musk and come out unscathed. The answer wasn't clear, but Derek knew one thing: he wasn't done yet. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's team was already working tirelessly behind the scenes. The announcement of an appeal was expected, but what no one had anticipated was the scale of Musk's response. He wasn't going to quietly accept defeat. He was going to fight back in ways that no one saw coming. The media buzzed with reports of Musk's intentions to refocus his efforts on his companies, promising to improve transparency, safety, and ethical practices. But to Derek, it all felt like a smoke screen. Musk was not someone who would just roll over. He would use his resources, his power, and his fame to try to reframe the narrative, to spin it in a way that cast him as the victim, the misunderstood genius fighting for progress. Derek's thoughts were interrupted by an email notification. It was from Sophia Kim, the whistleblower who had played a pivotal role in the trial. She had been quiet since the verdict, but her message was urgent. "Call me. I have something important to tell you." Derek dialed her number immediately, his curiosity piqued. When she answered, there was an edge to her voice, something that made him listen more closely. "Mr. Green, you need to be careful," Sophia warned. "I don't know how much of this you've seen yet, but there are things going on behind the scenes, things that could make this whole trial look like child's play." Derek felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What are you talking about?" Sophia's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Musk isn't going to let this go. He's going after anyone who's involved. He's already using his network to intimidate people, pushing them into silence. I've heard whispers about possible leaks, even using underhanded tactics to get the case overturned." "You're not safe, Derek." Derek's pulse quickened. This was bigger than he realized. Musk had never been one to back down from a fight, he always played to win, no matter the cost. And now, Derek was caught in the middle of it all. Sophia's warning lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. The trial was over, but the real battle had only just begun. Derek couldn't sleep. The events of the past few weeks had settled into a constant hum in his mind, like an electrical buzz he couldn't turn off. The victory in the trial, once a source of pride, had begun to feel more like an unspoken burden. The fallout from the case was more intense than he had imagined, and the people involved were more dangerous than he had anticipated. Sophia's warning echoed in his thoughts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on behind the scenes than anyone knew. Musk's silence was unnerving. After the verdict, he had retreated into the privacy of his companies, and that absence gave Derek a sense of dread. The billionaire was not the type to simply fade into the background. He was calculating, determined, and, above all, ruthless. It was early in the morning when Derek received another cryptic message, this time from an anonymous source. The email was short, direct, and left him with more questions than answers. "Musk is moving faster than you think. You're in deeper than you know." There was no signature, no identifying information. It could have been anyone, someone from Musk's camp, someone trying to manipulate Derek's next move, or perhaps someone with a vested interest in seeing the case unravel. But something about it sent a chill down his spine. The message felt real. It felt urgent. Derek leaned back in his chair, trying to make sense of the new development. He was no stranger to the complexities of high-stakes cases, but this was different. The stakes had escalated far beyond what he had imagined when he first took on the case against Musk. The trial had just been a public spectacle. The true battle was still unfolding in the shadows. He stood up, pacing back and forth in his small office. His mind raced, and his instincts told him to dig deeper. He had to understand what Musk was planning, and more importantly, what forces were conspiring against him. A few days later, Derek received a call from an unexpected source. It was Martin Walters, a former colleague who had worked with Musk in the early days of his ventures. Walters had been with Musk at Tesla during its formative years, a time when the company was still struggling to find its footing. "Hey, Derek. You probably don't remember me, but we met a few years back," Martin said, his voice heavy with unease. "I heard about the trial, and I think you need to hear what I have to say. This isn't over. It's far from over." Derek felt his heart rate quicken. He had heard of Walters, an early member of Musk's inner circle who had left Tesla under less than ideal circumstances. "What do you know, Martin?" Derek asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not sure how to say this, but Musk is not going to let you off easy. He's working behind the scenes, and there are things you don't know about him, things that could completely change the way you look at everything. You're not just dealing with a billionaire, you're dealing with someone who controls far more than you think." Derek felt a sense of urgency in Walter's words. "What are you saying, Martin?" Musk's empire isn't just about technology or space exploration. It's about influence. Power. The kind of power that gets you anything you want. And right now, you're a target. He's already moving pieces to discredit you. This trial was just a first step. If you think the legal system is the only battleground, you're wrong. Derek rubbed his temple, feeling the weight of the conversation settling on his shoulders. So, what do you want me to do with this information, Martin? How do I fight against someone like that? You need to dig into his past. Understand where the cracks are. There's a reason people leave his orbit, and it's not just because of bad business decisions. Musk has a way of making enemies disappear, professionally, at least. But there are people who know the truth, Derek. You need to find them. You need to get to them before he does. The line went silent for a moment before Martin spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. And be careful. Musk has eyes everywhere. Derek felt his pulse race as the weight of the conversation sank in. Martin's words rang in his ears as he hung up the phone. Musk's power went beyond money and innovation. It was a network of influence, one that spanned industries, governments, and more. Musk was untouchable, not just because of his wealth, but because of the invisible web of influence he controlled. Derek was standing in the eye of the storm, and he realized now that he had underestimated how deep Musk's reach went. The following week was a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late-night research. Derek scoured the internet for any clues, anything that could provide insight into Musk's inner circle. He reached out to former employees, ex-business partners, and even journalists who had covered Musk's rise to power. What he discovered was both unsettling and eye-opening. Musk's success had not only been fueled by innovation, it had been strategically built on a foundation of secrecy and control. There were whispers of lawsuits buried in sealed documents, competitors who had mysteriously disappeared, and a trail of former employees who had been silenced through non-disclosure agreements and hefty settlements. But there was one thing that Derek couldn't ignore: there were people who had left Musk's orbit for good reason. There were ex-employees who had seen the darker side of Musk's operations, people who had witnessed firsthand the way he wielded power. And if Derek could find them, he might just uncover the pieces of the puzzle that could bring Musk down once and for all. Derek contacted a former engineer from SpaceX, a man who had left the company after a falling out with Musk. The engineer had since gone into hiding, changing his identity to avoid the constant pressure from Musk's legal team. After several tense phone calls and meetings in undisclosed locations, the engineer, who went by the name Aaron, agreed to meet with Derek. Aaron was a nervous man, constantly looking over his shoulder, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. When Derek finally met him, he could tell that the engineer was afraid, but there was something in his eyes, something that told Derek he knew more than he was willing to admit. "I've seen things, Derek," Aaron said, his voice shaking. "Things that no one should ever see. Musk, he's not just a businessman. He's a manipulator. He makes deals with people who disappear into the shadows. He's got powerful friends, people who pull strings behind the scenes. And if you think he's going to let you destroy his reputation, you're gravely mistaken." Derek listened intently, trying to absorb everything Aaron was saying. "What kind of people are we talking about?" Aaron hesitated. "I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this: Musk's influence goes beyond business. He has connections in politics, law enforcement, the military. People who owe him favors. People who will do anything to protect him. If you push too hard, they'll come after you." The warning was clear: Derek wasn't just up against Musk anymore. He was up against an entire network, a web of influence so vast that it threatened to swallow him whole. Derek spent the next few days in a haze of research and phone calls, trying to piece together the pieces of the puzzle. He knew that if he wanted to bring Musk down, he couldn't just rely on legal tactics. He needed to expose the true extent of Musk's power, the way he manipulated and controlled everything around him. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. Musk had built a fortress around himself, a fortress made of money, influence, and secrecy. Derek was no longer just fighting for justice, he was fighting for his survival. As the days passed, Derek felt the noose tightening around him. The walls were closing in, and it was becoming clearer than ever, Musk wasn't just going to let this go. He was going to make sure Derek paid the price for daring to challenge him. And for Derek, the battle was just beginning. The next few days were a blur of confusion and mounting tension. Derek couldn't escape the gnawing feeling in his gut, the one that told him he was in over his head. He had spent the last several years fighting for justice, believing that the system would protect him if he was on the right side of the law. But now, with Musk's empire looming like an ever-expanding shadow, Derek realized that the law might not be enough. The fight had shifted from the courtroom to something much more dangerous, something he couldn't yet fully comprehend. He had known Musk was powerful, but the extent of that power was starting to unfold in ways he couldn't have imagined. Each new piece of information he uncovered made the situation seem darker. The deeper he went, the more it felt like the walls were closing in around him. Musk wasn't just a billionaire entrepreneur, he was a puppet master, and Derek was the pawn in his game. Derek sat at his desk, staring at the screen in front of him. His inbox was flooded with emails from people offering him information, some useful, others clearly designed to throw him off course. But then there was one email, simple, with no subject line. It was from someone anonymous. Musk has been tracking your every move. You're not just a target in the media anymore. Watch your back. The message sent a chill through him. He had suspected it, now, the confirmation was chilling. Musk had made it personal. Derek wasn't just fighting a man in a suit, he was up against a force that controlled the strings of the entire system. And Musk wasn't going to let Derek get away with what he had done. It was time to act. But Derek didn't know where to turn or who to trust anymore. Everyone had their own agenda, and he couldn't afford to make another wrong move. He had no choice but to take his next step carefully. The stakes were too high. Late that night, as Derek sat in his office reviewing case notes, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Sophia. "Derek, you need to leave town. It's not safe anymore." He stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. This wasn't the kind of message anyone wanted to receive. It wasn't just about the trial anymore, it was about survival. Sophia's warning was clear, things had escalated beyond what either of them had expected. Derek called her immediately, hoping to get more information. "Sophia, what's going on? Why do you think I need to leave?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Listen to me," she said, her voice strained with urgency. "I've been watching the situation, and I'm telling you, it's bad. You're not just on Musk's radar anymore. There are people working for him who will do whatever it takes to keep you quiet. They're looking for weaknesses, Derek. Don't wait until it's too late. You need to get out of the city." Derek felt a tightness in his chest. "What are you talking about? What kind of people are we talking about?" "People with connections in law enforcement, people with money to make things disappear. You're not just dealing with Musk anymore. You're dealing with people who can make your life a living hell if they want to. I've seen it happen to others before." Derek could hear her breath hitch in her chest, the fear evident in her tone. It was unlike Sophia to sound this way. She had always been strong, but now, there was a crack in her resolve. He knew she wasn't exaggerating. This wasn't just a fight over corporate secrets anymore. It was about something much more dangerous. "Okay, I get it," Derek said, his mind racing. "But where do I go? How do I even begin to get out of this?" Sophia didn't hesitate. "There's someone who can help you. A contact of mine. They'll help you get out of town safely, make sure you're protected. I'll send you the details. Just trust me, Derek. You're not safe here." He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "I'll be careful. Thanks, Sophia." The phone call ended, and Derek sat in the darkness of his office for a long time. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in, and for the first time, he felt truly vulnerable. He had thought the battle was about winning the case in court, about defeating Musk on a legal level. But now, it was clear that the fight was far more insidious, and the consequences of his victory were far-reaching. The next morning, Derek packed a small bag, making sure to leave his office in as much of a hurry as he could. His mind was clouded with uncertainty. Was leaving the right choice? Was he running from the problem, or was he simply playing it safe until he had more information? The truth was, Derek didn't know. He only knew that Musk had too many resources and too many people on his side to risk staying put. The danger wasn't just in the courtrooms anymore, it was in every corner of his life, from his home to his office to the very streets he walked on. Sophia had sent him the contact information for a man named Luke Daniels, a former private investigator who had worked with people from all walks of life, people who needed protection from powerful figures. Derek had no idea how Sophia knew him, but if she trusted him, then Derek had no choice but to do the same. The moment Derek stepped into the small, dimly lit coffee shop where he was supposed to meet Luke, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him. It wasn't paranoia, something about the place felt off. As if everyone was just waiting for something to happen. The air was thick with tension. Luke was sitting at a corner booth, dressed in a nondescript jacket and glasses. He looked harmless enough, just another guy trying to keep a low profile, but there was an intensity about him that Derek immediately recognized. This man had seen things that most people couldn't even fathom. "Mr. Green," Luke said, his voice low but firm. "You're in more trouble than you realize. Musk's reach goes far beyond what you can see. But don't worry, I can help you disappear if that's what you want. The question is, do you have the stomach for it?" Derek sat down across from him, his thoughts a whirlwind. "I don't know what you mean by disappear, but I need help. I need to figure out how to take down Musk. And I need to do it before he does the same to me." Luke studied Derek for a long moment before nodding. "I can help you, but it's going to be a long road. And it won't be easy. People like Musk, they don't just lose. They play a game most people can't even see." Derek leaned forward. "I'm ready. Tell me what to do. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" Derek felt like a man adrift on a stormy sea, each wave of new information crashing over him, threatening to pull him under. He sat in the dimly lit room with Luke Daniels, feeling the weight of the decisions ahead pressing on him. There was no turning back now, he was in this deep, and there was only one way forward. Luke leaned across the table, his face shadowed under the low light. "You're not just dealing with Musk. You're dealing with a machine. An entire ecosystem that he's built over the years. People think they're working for him, but they don't realize that they're part of something much bigger. If you go after Musk, you're going after the whole thing." Derek nodded, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. "I've seen the tip of the iceberg, Luke. The media campaign, the manipulation, the power he wields. It's all connected. But where do I even begin?" Luke's eyes glinted with a mixture of calculation and concern. "You start by understanding what Musk really is. Most people see him as the genius inventor or the visionary entrepreneur, but they miss the darker side of what he's built. They miss the web of influence, the political and financial ties that keep everything running smoothly. If you want to bring him down, you need to go to the source, the people he controls." Derek swallowed, his mind reeling. He had spent months focusing on the legal strategy, thinking that the case against Musk was enough to expose him. But this? This was something else entirely. It was no longer just about winning in court. It was about survival, and it was about taking on something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Over the next few days, Derek and Luke worked in the shadows, gathering intel, making calls, and following the trail of Musk's empire. The more Derek learned, the darker the picture became. He had known Musk's reputation as a visionary, but now he understood that his empire wasn't just about technology or space exploration. It was a web of power, a system that controlled industries, governments, and individuals. Musk's influence reached far beyond anything Derek had ever encountered. One evening, Luke took Derek to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place you drive past 1,000 times without ever noticing. But Derek soon learned that the warehouse was one of Musk's many hidden assets, places where power brokers, politicians, and businessmen came to make deals, to exchange favors, and to keep things off the radar. It was a place where Musk's influence was solidified in ways that the public would never know. As they walked through the dimly lit halls, Luke explained the true nature of the operation. Musk doesn't just make deals with CEOs and investors. He controls entire networks of people. The people who keep the world running. The media, the military contractors, the lobbyists. They all work for him, directly or indirectly. And when you go after someone like Musk, you're not just fighting him, you're fighting everyone who benefits from what he's built. Derek's head spun as he took in the enormity of what Luke was saying. Musk was more than just a man. He was an ecosystem, and taking him down meant dismantling everything he had built. But could he even survive such an endeavor? Could anyone? You've got to be careful, Derek, Luke warned, his voice low. You're playing with fire. Musk doesn't forgive easily, and his people don't hesitate to remove threats. If you want to take him down, you need to be 2 steps ahead. You need to anticipate every move he makes, and that's not easy. Derek felt his resolve hardening. He had come too far to turn back now. If he was going to take down Musk, he needed to understand the depth of the system he was up against. And the only way to do that was to dig even deeper. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure mounted. Derek's every move felt like it was being watched. He began to notice subtle changes around him, small things that suggested he wasn't as invisible as he thought. Phone calls that were abruptly cut off, cars that seemed to be following him, a sudden shift in the atmosphere at his office. It was clear, Musk was watching him. Sophia, who had been in constant contact with Derek, grew more concerned with each passing day. "Derek, I don't like this," she said one evening. "You're digging too deep. People like Musk don't let go easily. He's not just going to let you ruin everything he's built." "I'm not ruining anything, Sophia," Derek said, his voice more tense than he intended. "I'm exposing the truth. I'm doing what needs to be done." "I know, but you're doing it at great risk. You're becoming a threat to people who don't hesitate to eliminate threats. You need to be careful. I'm not the only one who's worried." Derek leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. He could feel the weight of her concern, but there was something else in her words, something that made him stop and think. "Who else is worried, Sophia?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "There are people who've been following you. I've been talking to some people on the inside, people who know what's going on. You're not just being watched by Musk's people. There are others in the shadows, people who want to make sure that you don't succeed. You need to think carefully about your next steps." Derek's heart pounded as her words sank in. He was not only up against Musk. There were others who wanted him gone, just as much as Musk did. As Derek tried to piece together everything he had learned, he realized that the fight was far more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just about taking down a billionaire, it was about dismantling a system that reached into every corner of society. The media, the legal system, the government, it was all connected, all influenced by the people Musk had aligned himself with. The people who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. But Derek wasn't ready to back down. Not now. Not after everything he had uncovered. He knew that if he could expose Musk's empire, it would change everything. The world would finally see what was really going on behind the scenes. And maybe, just maybe, he could give the world a fighting chance. The question was no longer whether he could take down Musk. It was whether he could survive the forces that would do anything to keep the truth hidden. Derek spent the following days in a haze of paranoia. The world that had once seemed so straightforward was now a labyrinth of danger and deception. He couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on him. Every step he took, every phone call he made, seemed to put him one step closer to something far more ominous than he had anticipated. He'd spent months preparing for the case against Elon Musk, working tirelessly to gather evidence, building his arguments, hoping that the legal system would work in his favor. But now, as the threat of violence and manipulation loomed larger, he realized that the legal system might be the least of his worries. Luke had warned him, Musk wasn't just a businessman, he was a kingmaker. He didn't just control companies or industries. He controlled entire systems, influencing politics, media, law enforcement, and even public opinion. To go after Musk now meant stepping into a world of shadows, where the rules of normal life no longer applied. Derek knew he was being watched. Every time he left his apartment, he checked for the telltale signs of surveillance. The car that always seemed to be parked across the street. The pedestrian who lingered too long near the coffee shop. He couldn't trust anyone, not even people he had once considered allies. In this world, everyone had a price, and everyone had a stake in keeping Musk's empire intact. But Derek couldn't just sit idly by. His only chance at survival, and his only chance at justice, was to keep pushing forward. He had to expose Musk, no matter the cost. It was late one night when Derek received a cryptic message from an unknown number. The text was short, but it sent a chill down his spine. Meet me at the old pier, midnight. You're being watched. No name. No details. Just that. Derek debated whether to go. It could easily be a trap, a final attempt to scare him off or discredit him in front of others. But deep down, he knew that if he didn't go, he might never get another chance to uncover something that could bring Musk down. The hour struck. He slipped out of his apartment and made his way through the darkened streets. His breath was shallow as he walked, alert to every sound, every shadow. The old pier, long abandoned and marked by rusting structures, seemed like the perfect place for a clandestine meeting, secluded, forgotten by most, a place where anything could happen without being seen. As he approached, he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the pier. The man was wearing a long coat, his face obscured by the dim light, but Derek could tell he was tall, broad-shouldered. "You made it," the man said, his voice low and gravely. Derek didn't respond immediately. He was sizing up the figure, trying to determine if this was a friend or foe. The man seemed to know too much, and Derek wasn't sure if that was comforting or dangerous. "Who are you?" Derek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man turned slightly, revealing his face. It was hard to make out in the poor light, but Derek could see the hardened look in his eyes. The man wasn't here to chat. "Doesn't matter," the man said coldly. "What matters is that you're in over your head, Green. Musk doesn't play by the rules. He owns the rules." Derek felt his chest tighten. "I know that. What do you want?" The man took a step closer, his voice dropping even lower. "I know you're trying to take him down. But you're not the only one. There are others who want to see Musk fall. You're not alone in this fight. But you need to be careful. Musk's reach goes further than you think." Derek's mind raced. "What do you mean? Who are these people?" The man shook his head. "That's not for you to know. Not yet. But trust me, there are forces at play here that you can't even comprehend. Musk has a lot of power, but there are bigger players behind him. You're in a game you don't fully understand." The word stung, and Derek felt a wave of unease wash over him. Who were these people? And why was this stranger, this shadow in the dark, helping him? "Why should I trust you?" Derek asked, the skepticism clear in his voice. The man paused before answering. "Because you don't have a choice. If you want to survive, you need allies. And you need to get smart about this. Musk won't hesitate to eliminate you. He's got people in high places, in law enforcement, in the media. Your every move is being watched. If you want to bring him down, you have to outsmart him. Derek clenched his fists, his thoughts swirling. What do I need to do? The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Derek. Everything you need to know is inside. But heed my warning, don't trust anyone. Not even the people you think are on your side. Musk's network is vast, and you can't afford to make mistakes. Before Derek could respond, the man turned and walked away into the darkness, leaving him with nothing but the chilling words and the envelope in his hand. Derek stood there, staring at the empty spot where the man had been just moments before. His heart raced, and his mind spun with questions. Was this a trap? Or was this the break he had been looking for? He ripped open the envelope, pulling out a series of papers. There were names, dates, and addresses, detailed notes about people connected to Musk's empire. Some were high-profile political figures. Others were media moguls. And there were a few names Derek didn't recognize, but they were clearly important players in the game. One name stood out among the rest, Ryan Carter. Derek's fingers trembled as he read the name again. Ryan Carter was a name he had heard in passing, associated with Musk's more secretive projects. It was rumored that Carter was one of Musk's closest allies, someone who helped handle Musk's affairs behind the scenes. If Derek could find a way to get close to Carter, he might be able to gain access to Musk's inner circle, and, more importantly, learn how to bring him down. But Derek knew this would be no easy task. Ryan Carter wasn't just some low-level player. He was someone who lived in the shadows, pulling strings in places no one could see. Getting to him would require more than just legal maneuvering, it would require going deeper into Musk's world than Derek had ever imagined. As Derek folded the papers back into the envelope, a single thought echoed in his mind: this is just the beginning. The danger was escalating, and the stakes were higher than ever. Musk wasn't just a man he had to fight. He was a force, an unstoppable network of influence, and to take him down, Derek would need to become part of that world. But how far was he willing to go to dismantle Musk's empire? And more importantly, could he survive it? The tension weighed heavily on Derek's chest as he stared at the envelope in his hand. Inside was information that could change everything, but at what cost? He had already ventured deeper into a dangerous game than he had ever anticipated, and each new piece of intel seemed to pull him further into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and deceit. He hadn't spoken to anyone about the meeting at the pier, he couldn't. No one could know about this shadowy figure or the cryptic message that had led him to the edge of something bigger than he could comprehend. Derek's mind raced as he walked back to his apartment. Ryan Carter. The name seemed innocuous enough, but Derek had learned enough by now to know that nothing was as it seemed. Ryan Carter wasn't just a name on a piece of paper, he was a linchpin in Musk's web of influence. Whoever Carter was, he was pivotal to Musk's operations, possibly holding the keys to everything Derek needed to take Musk down. But how was he supposed to get close to someone like that? Derek was just a lawyer. A regular guy, fighting a system that was stacked against him. Carter wasn't just any man, he was someone with connections in places Derek could never hope to reach. The only way to crack this open was to infiltrate Musk's circle, to learn its secrets from the inside. But how could he do that without getting caught? As Derek sat at his desk, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He didn't have the luxury of time or patience. Every minute he wasted put him one step closer to becoming a target. Musk didn't let threats linger, he eradicated them. Derek knew that. His only chance was to stay one step ahead, to outwit the system that had kept Musk in power for so long. The following week, Derek began his mission in earnest. He started by following the trail that led to Ryan Carter. Carter wasn't easy to track. He didn't have a public profile. No social media, no obvious business interests. He was a shadow, a ghost in a world that operated under the surface. Derek used every resource at his disposal to gather information. He contacted former employees of Musk's companies, digging through public records, using his legal background to uncover patterns in Carter's behavior. Slowly, he pieced together a picture of Carter's life, where he lived, who he associated with, and, most importantly, how he interacted with Musk. But as Derek delved deeper, something began to gnaw at him. The more he learned about Carter, the more he realized that the man wasn't just a cog in Musk's machine. He was part of something far larger, something that extended into the highest echelons of power. Carter wasn't just working for Musk, he was an agent of the system itself, a man who pulled the strings behind the scenes, shaping the political landscape and the business world in Musk's image. Derek had to be careful. He was now up against a man who was as slippery as the very system he was trying to dismantle. Every move had to be calculated, every interaction precise. One night, Derek sat in a nondescript cafe, scrolling through his phone. He had made contact with someone who might have the key to getting closer to Carter, an insider who had worked with Musk's inner circle. The information he was waiting for could be the opening he needed. As he waited, he noticed a man sitting 2 tables away, glancing at him from time to time. The man's gaze lingered just a little too long, and Derek's heart rate spiked. He had a feeling that the man wasn't just a passerby. Something about his demeanor felt off, too alert, too focused. Derek quickly pocketed his phone, trying to act nonchalant. His thoughts raced. Was he being watched? Had Musk's people found him? The man stood up, casually strolling toward the door. As he passed Derek's table, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Derek felt a chill run down his spine. This was no coincidence. The man knew exactly who he was. Derek watched the man leave the cafe, his mind spinning. This wasn't a game anymore. Whoever was behind the surveillance wasn't playing by the usual rules. He was being hunted. The next day, Derek made the decision to escalate things. He needed to confront Ryan Carter directly. He didn't have all the pieces, but he had enough. It was time to see if the man would bite. Derek arranged a meeting, pretending to be an interested party in a high-profile legal matter. He used a combination of his legal acumen and some creative networking to secure an introduction through a mutual acquaintance, a lobbyist who had ties to the highest levels of power in the business world. The lobbyist had warned him that Carter was not a man to be trifled with, but Derek had no choice. He couldn't wait any longer. The meeting took place in a sleek, modern office building, far removed from the public eye. Derek was ushered into a private office, and as he entered, he felt an immediate sense of unease. The room was minimalist, almost sterile, but the man sitting at the desk was anything but. Ryan Carter was tall, sharply dressed, and had a presence that immediately put Derek on edge. His eyes, dark and calculating, appraised Derek with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Carter wasn't surprised to see him, he knew exactly who Derek was, and why he was there. "You must be Derek Green," Carter said, his voice calm but authoritative. "I've heard a lot about you." Derek didn't flinch. He had expected Carter to know who he was. He had known from the moment he arranged the meeting that it would be a test. But what did Carter know? And more importantly, what did he want? "I'm here to talk business," Derek said, playing it cool. "There's an opportunity one think you might be interested in. I've got some legal expertise that could be of value." Carter raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you do. But you're not here just to talk shop, are you?" Derek's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Carter leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You're not here because you want to make a deal. You're here because you think you can take down Elon Musk." Derek's breath caught in his throat. It was as if Carter had just read his mind. "I don't know what you're talking about," Derek said, keeping his voice steady. Carter smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You've been digging, haven't you? Into Musk's affairs, his network. You're a smart man, Derek. But you're also playing a very dangerous game." The tension in the room was palpable. Derek knew he had to be careful. This wasn't just about legal strategy anymore. This was about survival. "I'm not here to threaten anyone," Derek said, forcing himself to remain calm. "I just want to know the truth." "The truth?" Carter chuckled, his voice low and menacing. "The truth is that you're already too deep in this. You think you can expose Musk? You think you can change the system he's built? You don't understand, Derek. There are forces at play here that you can't even fathom. Musk isn't just some billionaire. He's a man at the center of a vast, intricate web. And if you keep poking at it, you'll get tangled in a way you'll never escape." Derek's pulse raced as he realized that Carter was trying to warn him, though the warning felt more like a threat. But he couldn't back down. "Not now. I'll take my chances," Derek said, his voice unwavering. "I'm not stopping until Musk is held accountable." Carter's smile faded, replaced by something colder. "Then you'll learn the hard way. You'll regret underestimating the people who have a stake in keeping Musk where he is. And when it's all over, you'll realize that you were never in control. You never had a choice." With that, Carter stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. As Derek left the meeting, the weight of Carter's words hung heavily in his mind. He had known that Musk's empire was vast, but now he was starting to understand just how dangerous this fight would be. He wasn't just up against Musk anymore. He was up against an entire system, a system built on manipulation, control, and power. Derek had a choice to make. Would he continue to fight, even knowing that the cost could be far greater than he had imagined? Or would he walk away, leaving Musk's empire intact? One thing was certain, there would be no turning back. Derek couldn't sleep that night. The adrenaline from his meeting with Ryan Carter still coursed through his veins, keeping him restless and alert. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Carter's words echoed in his mind, each one more chilling than the last. "You think you can change the system Musk has built? There are forces at play here that you can't even fathom. You'll regret underestimating the people who have a stake in keeping Musk where he is." It wasn't just Musk he was up against anymore. Derek had been warned, in no uncertain terms, that the entire system Musk represented was bigger than him, more intricate, more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Musk wasn't a lone actor, he was the tip of a vast and well-oiled machine, and every move Derek made to take him down was a threat to that machine. The system wasn't something Derek could dismantle with a few clever arguments in court. It was a beast with many heads, each one more powerful and insidious than the last. But Derek wasn't going to back down. He couldn't. He'd already sacrificed too much, put his reputation and career on the line, all in the name of justice. No, this wasn't just about Musk anymore. This was about something far bigger. It was about exposing a system of corruption, control, and manipulation that had poisoned the very institutions that were supposed to protect people. Derek had seen it in his own career, how the wealthy and powerful used the legal system as a tool, bending it to their will. Now, he was standing at the precipice of something much darker. But one question gnawed at him: was he ready for the consequences? The following morning, Derek sat at his desk, staring at the case files scattered around him. He was no longer just looking for ways to win a legal battle, he was looking for a way to expose a criminal network that spanned industries and governments. Musk wasn't just a business mogul, he was the gatekeeper to an entire ecosystem of power. And that power extended far beyond the confines of his companies and products. It reached into every corner of the world, from boardrooms to legislative chambers, and it had entrenched itself so deeply in society that Derek wasn't sure where the system ended and where the people began. He had to keep digging. He had to keep moving forward. He couldn't afford to hesitate. The first breakthrough came a few days later when Derek received an encrypted email from an anonymous source. The subject line was simple, yet chilling: Musk's blind spot. Inside the email were documents, internal communications from Tesla, SpaceX, and other Musk-affiliated companies. The documents detailed financial transactions, contracts, and potential illegal activities that Derek had never seen before. They were detailed, precise, and damning. One section, in particular, stood out to Derek, a series of emails between Musk and high-ranking government officials. The emails referenced a multi-million-dollar deal involving several government contracts for SpaceX, and the communication made it clear that Musk had used political influence to secure the contracts, bypassing legal channels and using underhanded tactics to gain an unfair advantage. Derek's heart raced as he read through the correspondence. This was the kind of evidence that could bring Musk down, if only he could get it into the right hands. But as he stared at the screen, another thought crept into his mind. If Musk could manipulate government officials this easily, what else was he capable of? Derek's next move was risky, but it was necessary. The documents he had just uncovered weren't enough on their own. He needed more concrete evidence, something that could tie Musk directly to the illicit activities he had uncovered. Derek knew exactly where to go. There was a whistleblower, someone who had worked within Musk's empire, someone who had witnessed firsthand the corrupt deals and shady practices that had kept the machine running smoothly. Getting to the whistleblower, however, was another matter entirely. After weeks of work, Derek managed to track down the whistleblower's identity. His name was Thomas Weller, and he had been a mid-level executive at one of Musk's lesser-known ventures. He had witnessed things no one should ever have to see. Things that, if exposed, could destroy Musk's entire empire. The problem was, Weller had gone off the grid years ago. The last anyone had heard of him, he had disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of rumors and unanswered questions. But Derek wasn't one to give up easily. He had a few contacts in the private investigation world, and one of them came through with a lead on Weller's whereabouts. It took Derek 3 days to track down Weller. He found him in a small town in the Midwest, hiding out in a rundown house on the edge of town. Derek approached cautiously, knowing that Weller would be wary. People like him didn't just walk away from Musk's world, they ran, they hid, and they stayed hidden. Weller wasn't going to just hand over information, Derek had to convince him. As Derek approached the house, he saw a figure standing in the window, watching him. The blinds quickly snapped shut, and Derek's gut tightened. He wasn't alone here. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A few long moments passed before the door creaked open. The man who answered was older than Derek had expected, his face haggard and lined with years of stress, but there was a sharpness to his eyes that told Derek he hadn't lost his edge. "You're looking for Weller, huh?" the man said gruffly, his voice low and cautious. "Come to finish me off too?" Derek hesitated, then spoke softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk." The man studied him for a long moment before stepping aside to let Derek in. The conversation with Weller didn't go as Derek had hoped. Weller was reluctant to speak, paranoid and constantly looking over his shoulder as though he feared being watched. The deeper Derek dug, the more Weller clammed up. But Derek wasn't going to give up. He pushed harder, leaning into the conversation, offering assurances of safety, of protection. It took hours before Weller finally cracked. "They'll kill me if I talk," Weller muttered, his voice barely audible. "Musk, he's got eyes everywhere. You have no idea who you're messing with." "I know what I'm up against," Derek said, his tone firm. "But this isn't just about you or me. It's about exposing what Musk has done. It's about stopping the people who control everything from behind the scenes. You can help with that. You can make sure this stops." Weller finally sighed, his shoulders sagging. He looked at Derek as though he had made a decision. "You want the truth? All right. But you need to understand something, there's more than just Musk at play here. There are people pulling his strings, people that you'll never even see coming." Derek's pulse quickened. This was it, the breakthrough he had been waiting for. Weller had the answers, and now it was just a matter of getting him to trust him enough to spill everything. As Weller began to recount what he had seen during his time at Musk's companies, Derek knew one thing for sure, the road ahead was going to be even more dangerous than he had imagined. And the closer he got to the truth, the more he would have to risk. But it was too late to back out now. The stakes had never been higher. The time for playing it safe was over. Derek was in the fight of his life, and there was no turning back. Derek's mind raced as he left Weller's small, run-down house. The information he had just learned sent shivers down his spine. Weller had confirmed everything Derek feared. Musk was not just a billionaire entrepreneur with a penchant for launching rockets and electric cars. No, he was part of something much larger, a network of powerful individuals who controlled industries, politics, and much more behind the scenes. And Musk wasn't even at the top of this hierarchy. He was just one cog in a massive machine. Derek had suspected this all along, but hearing it from Weller, someone who had been there, who had seen the inner workings of Musk's empire, made it all the more real. The depth of the corruption, the extent of the control, it was staggering. As Derek drove back to his apartment, the weight of the world seemed to press down on him. He had uncovered a deep, dangerous conspiracy, but with that knowledge came a terrifying truth: the people behind this operation were not just businessmen. They were political players, powerful figures who operated in the shadows. They had the resources, the connections, and the will to do whatever it took to maintain their control. And Derek was now in their crosshairs. But Derek didn't back down. He had already come too far. He had exposed too much. There was no going back now. If he wanted to take Musk down, and the system that protected him, he would have to go even deeper into the abyss. The following days were a blur of legal wrangling, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Derek worked around the clock, following every lead, sifting through the mountains of documents, and piecing together the vast web of corruption that stretched from Musk's companies to the highest levels of government. It was overwhelming. Every time he thought he had uncovered a key piece of the puzzle, another layer would emerge, revealing an even darker truth. But amidst all the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. Derek had started to build a case that could take Musk and his associates down. It wasn't just about the illegal activities Derek had uncovered, it was about something much bigger. It was about the way the system had been corrupted, the way power had been concentrated in the hands of a few, and the way they had manipulated the law to keep themselves untouchable. Derek wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for a new world. A world where the wealthy and powerful didn't get to play by different rules. A world where the truth could be heard, no matter how loud the voices of those in power were. But with every step forward, Derek knew he was getting closer to the edge. Musk wasn't going to let this go on for much longer. And the people pulling his strings, they weren't going to just sit back and let Derek tear their empire down. Late one night, as Derek sat alone in his apartment, poring over his notes, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him he needed to answer. "Derek Green?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes," Derek replied cautiously, his senses alert. "You don't know me, but I know you," the voice continued. "I've been following your progress, and I think it's time we had a little conversation." Derek's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some random person calling to give him advice. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing, and exactly what he was after. "Who is this?" Derek asked, his mind racing. "Let's just say I'm someone who wants to see Musk taken down as much as you do," the voice said. "But you're going to need help if you're going to succeed." Derek leaned forward, his instincts on high alert. "What do you mean? Help from who?" "There are people within the system who want change," the voice said cryptically. "People who have the resources to help you. But you're going to have to trust me if you want to get to the truth." The line went silent for a moment, and Derek's mind whirled with questions. Who was this person? Could he be trusted? Was this just another trap set by Musk's people to throw him off course? But then the voice spoke again, this time more urgently. "You're being watched, Derek. They know what you're doing. You need to make a choice: either you accept our help, or you keep going on your own and risk losing everything." The word sent a chill down Derek's spine. He knew the risks. He had been running from danger for months now. Every step he took felt like a step closer to being exposed, to being silenced. But this? This was different. There was someone out there who knew what he was doing. Someone who wanted to help him take Musk down. It could be his chance, the break he needed. But could he trust this mysterious voice? And if he did, what would it cost him? Who are you? Derek demanded again, his voice sharp. Not important, the voice replied. What's important is that you listen. The next few days will be critical. You need to prepare. We're going to move against Musk, but it's not going to be easy. You'll need to act fast, and you'll need to trust the people we bring you in contact with. The line went dead. Derek stared at his phone in stunned silence. The call had left him with more questions than answers. Who was this person? What kind of help did they have to offer? And why did they want to help him? But one thing was clear, if he wanted to bring Musk down, he couldn't do it alone. He had already seen the depth of the conspiracy, he couldn't take on an empire of this scale without allies. He had no choice but to take the leap. He had to trust someone, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The next day, Derek received a message. The text was simple, meet me at the old warehouse on 5th, midnight. Come alone. As Derek stood outside the dilapidated warehouse at midnight, the world around him seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of city traffic barely audible in the distance. He had no idea what to expect, but he was certain of one thing, this was a turning point. Whatever happened tonight, it would change everything. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and Derek stepped inside, his pulse quickening. He had come alone, just as instructed, but he wasn't sure what kind of danger he was walking into. The warehouse was empty, save for a few scattered crates. The only light came from a single bulb hanging overhead, casting long shadows across the floor. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. Derek Green, the figure said, his voice low and gravelly. I've been waiting for you. Derek's heart pounded as he stood in the dimly lit warehouse, trying to make out the figure before him. His instincts screamed to be cautious, but he had already come too far to hesitate now. He had been running blind for months, piecing together fragments of evidence, but it had always felt like he was chasing shadows. Tonight, that might change. The man before him was tall, his features obscured by the low light and the hood he wore. There was an aura of control about him, the kind of calm that only came from someone used to being in charge. His voice had been steady and unbothered, yet it held a certain weight, one that made Derek realize this wasn't just some random informant. Whoever this was, they were connected to something much bigger. Who are you? Derek asked again, his voice firm but cautious. The figure chuckled softly, his breath echoing slightly in the empty space. Does it matter right now? What matters is that I'm here to help you bring down Musk, and everyone who's been protecting him. Derek didn't speak immediately. He was still trying to process everything. Who could this person be? How did they know so much about Musk? Why were they suddenly offering him help? None of it added up. The man stepped closer, lowering his hood to reveal his face, sharp features, dark eyes, and a deep-set expression that spoke of years of quiet planning. He was older than Derek, probably in his late 40s, but there was a hardened intensity to him that suggested he had seen things that could break most people. I think we can skip the formalities, the man said. I know who you are, Derek. You've been poking around Musk's empire for months, trying to expose things most people wouldn't dare touch. I've been watching you. Watching me? Derek's voice grew tight. Why? Because you're not the only one who wants to take him down, the man replied. There are people, good people, who are tired of the way Musk and his kind have been manipulating the system. We're tired of being puppets. The difference is, we have the resources to do something about it. And now, so do you. Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He had known that his pursuit of Musk was dangerous, but now, hearing it from someone who seemed to have a hand in the shadows, it felt even more real. What had he stepped into? What kind of world was he really dealing with? Who are we? Derek asked, his suspicion rising. And how do I know I can trust you? The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was knowing, almost predatory. Trust me. I'm not asking you to trust me, Derek. I'm asking you to trust the cause. You're after Musk, and we're after something bigger. This isn't just about Musk anymore. It's about taking down the system that's been rigged from the inside out. The people who run the show, Musk is just one piece of the puzzle. Derek's mind whirled. He had suspected for a while now that Musk wasn't the only player in the game, but hearing it from someone in the know made it all the more daunting. How far did this conspiracy go? Who else was involved? So, what now? Derek asked, trying to keep his voice steady. What exactly do you want from me? The man stepped closer, his presence suddenly more imposing. What we want from you is simple. We want you to keep digging. We want you to keep fighting. But this time, you'll have help. You've been going at this alone, but you don't have to anymore. Derek took a deep breath. It was a tempting offer. He'd been in this alone for far too long, and the idea of having allies, real, powerful allies, was something he couldn't ignore. But he had been burned before. He'd trusted people who had only turned on him, used him for their own ends. He couldn't make that mistake again. I need more than just your word, Derek said, standing his ground. What exactly are you offering? The man's eyes glittered with a knowing look. What we're offering, Derek, is access. Access to the networks you need to bring Musk down. The connections, the people, the evidence. We've been gathering intel on Musk for years. We know where the bodies are buried, and we can help you unearth them. Derek considered this for a long moment. The thought of finally having the upper hand, of being able to expose Musk's empire for the criminal operation it truly was incredibly tempting. But there was a risk. A huge one. What do you want in return? Derek asked cautiously. The man's smile widened, but there was a dark edge to it now. All we want is your commitment. We want you to be on the right side of history. The people we're up against aren't just dangerous, they're ruthless. If you want to win, you need to decide if you're ready to fight for everything. Are you ready to take that step, Derek? For a moment, Derek's thoughts flickered back to the days before he'd started this crusade against Musk. His life had been predictable, comfortable even. But it had also been shallow. A career as a lawyer, sure. But had it meant anything? Had it stood for something? Now, as he stood in the shadows with this mysterious man, Derek realized that the fight he had started had become more than just a legal case. It was about justice. It was about changing the very system that had allowed people like Musk to flourish while everyone else was left to fend for themselves. Could he back down now? No, Derek said firmly, his voice steady. I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes. The man's expression softened slightly, a look of approval crossing his face. Good. You'll have what you need. But remember, this isn't a game. There are people out there who will do anything to protect Musk and their interests. You can't hesitate. You can't afford to second-guess yourself. I understand, Derek said, nodding. He had made his choice. The path forward would be filled with danger, but there was no turning back now. This was bigger than him. It was bigger than Musk. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With the help of his new allies, Derek gained access to intelligence, documents, and even contacts within the networks Musk had so carefully cultivated. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Derek realized just how deep the corruption ran. Musk wasn't just a business tycoon, he was a symbol of a corrupt system that permeated every layer of society. But even with this newfound information, the threats against Derek and his allies grew stronger. Musk's people were watching him now, and it was only a matter of time before they made their move. One evening, while reviewing the latest intel on his laptop, Derek received a call. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Derek answered, his voice tense. "You're playing a dangerous game, Derek," the voice on the other end said. It was cold, menacing. "I would advise you to stop while you still can. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The threat hung in the air, but Derek wasn't scared. "Not anymore. I'm not stopping," he said, his voice steady. "This is bigger than Musk, bigger than any of you. I'm bringing it all down." There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again, quieter this time. "You'll regret this. You don't even know who you're dealing with." The line went dead. Derek sat back in his chair, his resolve hardening. Whoever this was, whoever was behind Musk's empire, they underestimated him. He had allies now, and he wasn't backing down. The fight had only just begun. Derek couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a constant weight on his chest, a gnawing sensation that made every step he took feel heavier. The mysterious figure, the shadowy figure who had offered him help, had become a lifeline. But even with these new allies, Derek knew the clock was ticking. He was getting closer to something big, and that meant he was also getting closer to being exposed. The data, the contacts, and the inside information that he now had access to were powerful, but they were also dangerous. Musk and his associates had eyes everywhere. The more Derek learned, the more vulnerable he became. He had always known there would be risks, but it was different when you felt those risks closing in around you. Every time Derek checked his phone or opened his email, he felt like someone was waiting on the other side, ready to strike. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an anonymous email. It was brief, too brief. "We know what you're doing. Stop now. You won't win." Derek's gut churned as he stared at the message. It wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. The fact that they knew about him, about his investigation, sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. But it wasn't just fear, it was anger. They were trying to intimidate him, to make him back down. He couldn't let that happen. Not now. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he debated his next move. There was no reason to respond. The message was a warning, plain and simple. Responding could only make things worse. But Derek wasn't the kind of person to hide. He wasn't going to run from these threats. Instead, he hit reply, typing one simple word, "Try me." The days that followed were filled with paranoia. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar car driving past his apartment, made Derek's heart race. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching him. The walls were closing in, and there was no way to stop it. But he kept moving forward. Each new piece of evidence he uncovered was like a spark in the dark, driving him onward. He had found links between Musk's companies and offshore accounts, documents that suggested illegal tax evasion and insider trading. But the more he dug, the more the complexity of the operation became apparent. It wasn't just Musk's companies. It was a sprawling network of elites who had been operating in the shadows for years. One evening, Derek sat in his small apartment, poring over the latest documents he had obtained. He had been tracing financial transactions from SpaceX, Tesla, and other Musk-owned ventures. There were offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, signed deals with foreign governments, and evidence of bribes paid to political figures across multiple countries. The scale of the operation was staggering. It was clear now that Musk's empire was more than just a business empire, it was a global web of influence and power. As Derek scrolled through the files, something caught his eye. A name, an unexpected name, appeared repeatedly throughout the documents. It wasn't Musk's name, but it was close. It was someone named Edward Hayes, a name Derek didn't recognize, but one that seemed to be connected to every illegal transaction he had found so far. Derek's heart raced as he jotted down the name. He had no idea who Hayes was, but he knew he needed to find out. If Hayes was involved in this vast network, he might be the missing link Derek had been searching for. The next day, Derek reached out to the only contact he had left from his days in law school, a private investigator named Lisa Bennett. She was one of the few people he trusted implicitly. Lisa had always been able to dig deep into backgrounds and find hidden connections. Derek didn't know how much she could help him, but he had to try. Lisa agreed to meet with him later that afternoon at a cafe across town. When Derek arrived, Lisa was already there, sipping a coffee, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Derek," she said, her voice cool and professional as always. "What's this about? You said it was urgent." Derek sat down across from her, pushing the stack of papers towards her. "I've been digging into Musk's empire, his business dealings, his finances. There's someone named Edward Hayes who keeps popping up. I can't find any information on him. But I know he's involved in everything. I need to know who he is." Lisa looked down at the documents, flipping through them with practiced ease. She didn't ask questions, just scanned them quickly. After a moment, she looked back up at him, her expression serious. "This is big, Derek," she said. "I've seen this name before. Hayes is a ghost, but he's connected to some of the biggest players in the game. He's been on the radar for years, but no one's ever been able to pin him down. The thing is, he's not just a businessman. He's a fixer. A behind-the-scenes operator who cleans up messes, makes sure things stay in the shadows." Derek leaned forward. "Where can I find him?" Lisa shook her head. "That's the problem. Hayes doesn't have a public life. He's not someone you can just track down with a quick search. But I know someone who might be able to help. I'll reach out, see what I can do." Derek nodded. "I need this, Lisa. This is the key to everything." The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. Derek was living in a constant state of tension, waiting for Lisa to get back to him. He had no idea what she was working on, but he trusted her. She had come through for him in the past, and he needed her expertise now more than ever. Then, late one night, Derek received a call. It was Lisa. "I found something," she said, her voice low. "You were right. Edward Hayes is more than just a fixer. He's been the go-to man for some of the most powerful people in the world. But here's the thing, I found an address. It's not much, but it's a lead. You need to be careful. I don't know what's waiting for you there." Derek felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. Hayes could be the final piece of the puzzle. But as Lisa's warning echoed in his mind, Derek knew he had to be cautious. Hayes wasn't just a name in the shadows, he was someone who had survived by staying hidden. The risks were higher than ever, and Derek couldn't afford to make any missteps. "I'll be careful," Derek said. "Thanks, Lisa. This could change everything." The address Lisa provided led him to an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. The area was dark, desolate, and devoid of life, save for the occasional flicker of a street lamp in the distance. Derek's heart beat faster as he approached the building, his every step amplified in the silence of the night. The warehouse loomed ahead of him, and his instincts screamed that this was no ordinary location. He checked his phone one last time, no new messages. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he was ready. Whatever this was, it was the next step in unraveling Musk's empire. Derek stepped inside. The warehouse was silent, save for the faint sound of Derek's breath as it quickened with every step. His footsteps echoed off the cold, cracked concrete floors as he made his way deeper into the dimly lit space. The air was thick with dust, the musty scent of decay hanging in the stillness. This was no ordinary building, it felt like a place where secrets were buried, where shadows gathered and never left. His heart pounded as he reached for his phone, a sense of urgency coursing through him. Lisa had told him to be careful. She had warned him, but now that he was here, he couldn't afford to hesitate. The lead she'd given him had been precise. This was the place where Edward Hayes operated, where the shadowy figure behind Musk's empire pulled strings. This was the place where everything came together. And everything, Derek knew, could fall apart. The warehouse itself was a labyrinth, with narrow hallways leading to rooms shrouded in darkness. Derek's eyes adjusted to the low light as he moved from one room to the next, each space empty, save for the odd piece of old machinery or stacked crates. The silence was unsettling. He was starting to wonder if he'd been led into a trap, if Hayes was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he jumped, the sudden vibration making him startle. He fumbled for it, answering without looking at the screen. "Derek?" It was Lisa's voice, urgent, her tone a stark contrast to the calm, calculated atmosphere of the warehouse. "What is it?" Derek asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You're not alone," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Someone's watching you. Someone is inside that warehouse with you. You need to get out of there now." Derek froze. His body went rigid, his senses on high alert. He scanned the shadows around him, his eyes darting between the dark corners of the warehouse. He had walked into a trap. The feeling, that nagging sensation that had been plaguing him for weeks, had been right. But this time, it was more than a feeling, it was real. "Stay on the line," Derek whispered, his breath shallow as his mind raced. "I need a way out." "I'm trying," Lisa's voice crackled through the phone, distorted by the poor signal. "I've got someone looking into the building's security systems. But you need to move fast. Don't trust anyone in there, Derek. They'll know you're coming." Derek's eyes scanned the room again, focusing on every sound, every movement. It was as if the building itself was alive, whispering secrets from the shadows. There was a faint rustling, a noise coming from behind one of the larger crates stacked along the wall. Without thinking, Derek slid the phone into his pocket, moving stealthily toward the source of the noise. His fingers brushed the cool metal of a crowbar that had been left on the ground nearby, and for a moment, he hesitated. Should he arm himself? Was this really happening? But before he could make a decision, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. A figure. Derek's pulse quickened as he adjusted his position, staying low, trying to make himself invisible in the darkness. His eyes locked on the figure, a man who was moving swiftly between the shadows, just as Derek had done moments ago. The man was dressed in black, his face hidden by a mask, his movements fluid and deliberate. Derek's instinct kicked in, and he took a step forward, ready to confront the figure, but a voice echoed through the warehouse, stopping him in his tracks. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Derek." Derek froze. The voice was deep, cold, but there was an unmistakable familiarity in it. He recognized it instantly. The man speaking was no stranger, he knew him. It was Edward Hayes. The man behind the curtains, the one who had been manipulating everything from the shadows. Hayes stepped out from the darkness, his face now visible, his mask gone. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of calm authority that made Derek's blood run cold. Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Just a predatory glint in his eyes. "I've been watching you for some time," Hayes continued, his voice smooth as silk. "You've been quite the thorn in Musk's side, haven't you? But now you're starting to realize that you've bitten off more than you can chew." Derek's grip tightened on the crowbar, his knuckles white. He knew Hayes had to be involved in this whole operation, but hearing the words spill from his mouth made it feel all too real. There was no going back now. Musk's empire, and the hidden network behind it, were more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "What do you want?" Derek demanded, his voice steady despite the growing anxiety inside him. "Oh, Derek," Hayes sighed, almost mockingly. "What I want is simple. I want you to stop. I want you to leave this investigation alone. There's no need for you to go any further. You have no idea what you're really up against." Derek's mind raced. Every instinct told him to fight, to take Hayes down and escape, but there was something about Hayes's demeanor that made Derek pause. This man wasn't just some mid-level player in the game. Hayes was the one who controlled the strings, who could pull the levers of power from the shadows. Derek was nothing compared to him. You think I'm scared of you? Derek asked, his voice a mix of defiance and disbelief. You think I'll just walk away from this? You should, Hayes replied, his voice calm, almost sad. You're in over your head. Musk doesn't want you to uncover the truth, and neither do I. But you don't have the resources to fight this. You're just one man, Derek. And the people I work with? They're far more dangerous than you can ever imagine. Derek's mind spun. Hayes was right about one thing, he was just one man. But that wasn't enough to make him back down. He had come too far. If there was one thing he had learned in the past months, it was that no matter how powerful the forces against him were, he couldn't let them win. He couldn't let the darkness continue unchecked. I'm not going anywhere, Derek said, his voice low but firm. You can't stop me. Hayes' smile widened, but it was a grin filled with amusement, not fear. Oh, Derek. I don't need to stop you. I just need to make sure you never make it out of here alive. In that moment, Derek realized just how deep the conspiracy went. It wasn't just Musk he was up against, it was an entire network of powerful people who would do anything to protect their interests. And if Derek wasn't careful, he would become just another casualty in their war. The situation was spiraling out of control. Derek's pulse raced as Hayes' words hung in the air. He was trapped. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like a vice, but despite the fear swirling inside him, Derek's resolve only strengthened. There was no turning back now. The walls were closing in, but he wouldn't let them close around him without a fight. He glanced around the room, searching for an escape, anything that could give him an advantage. But before he could act, a cold voice rang out again, closer now. You really think you can take on the entire system, Derek? Hayes asked, his tone laced with disdain. You have no idea what you're up against. Derek clenched the crowbar, preparing to face whatever came next. Derek's grip on the crowbar tightened as Hayes' words echoed in his mind. The darkness of the warehouse seemed to press in from all sides, like the walls themselves were closing in on him. Hayes stood there, unflinching, his confident posture exuding a calm that Derek couldn't quite shake. The man wasn't just a player in Musk's world, he was the puppet master, pulling strings and controlling the fate of anyone who dared cross the line. Derek's heart raced in his chest, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. He could run. He could turn tail, escape from the warehouse, and walk away from all of this. He'd be free of the dangers, free of the relentless pursuit from Musk's empire. But the thought of giving up, of walking away after everything he'd uncovered, the evidence of corruption, the lives destroyed, the immense power being hoarded by a few, made his blood run cold. He couldn't back down now. Not when he was so close. Not when the truth was right within his grasp. I'm not running, Hayes, Derek said, his voice firm, despite the knot of fear tightening in his stomach. You can't stop me. Hayes smiled again, though there was no warmth in it. Oh, Derek, you're so much more naive than I gave you credit for. You think you can expose Musk? You think that anyone will listen to you? You're nothing but a small part of a much larger game. And in the end, when it's all said and done, you'll be forgotten, just like all the others who tried to take him down. Derek's mind raced, piecing together the chilling truth Hayes had just laid bare. It wasn't just about Musk. It was about the system, the powerful, corrupt network that held control over governments, businesses, and the lives of ordinary people. Musk might have been the face, but Hayes was the shadow, the hand that guided the unseen forces in this global chess game. And Derek was just one small piece. But for the first time, the reality of that didn't scare him, it motivated him. He wasn't just going to be a pawn. He was going to expose this web of deceit, no matter the cost. Before he could respond, Hayes stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Derek with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Let me show you something, Hayes said, his tone shifting to one of quiet menace. You want to know the truth? Fine. I'll give you a glimpse. Derek tensed, his fingers still clutching the crowbar, ready to defend himself if things escalated. Hayes motioned for him to follow, and after a moment of hesitation, Derek took a cautious step forward. There was no turning back now. The two of them walked deeper into the warehouse, toward a dimly lit room at the far end. The door creaked as Hayes pushed it open, revealing a space that looked like it had been frozen in time, old, dusty equipment and piles of paper scattered across the floor. But it wasn't the room's contents that caught Derek's attention. It was the large computer monitor mounted against the wall. Hayes moved to the desk, pressing a few keys, and the screen flickered to life. What appeared was a series of encrypted files, each one labeled with a different name, each one a set of documents containing confidential information. The names were all familiar: top executives, politicians, journalists, and even members of law enforcement. But what struck Derek the most was the list of people connected to the files, the names of people he had been investigating, people who had been silenced, erased. Every single one of these people, Hayes said, his voice low, was a threat to the network. They either tried to expose us or were too curious for their own good. You know what happened to them, don't you? Derek's throat tightened as he looked at the screen. These were people who had been eliminated in cold blood, their disappearances chalked up to accidents, suicides, or just lost causes. The network wasn't just about power, it was about control. About erasing anyone who could possibly threaten the empire they had built. This is the truth you wanted, Derek, Hayes continued. You wanted to know what you were up against. Now you do. Derek swallowed hard, his mind racing as the weight of what he was seeing sank in. This wasn't just about Musk. This was about a system so powerful that it could destroy lives without anyone ever knowing the truth. The people in these files weren't just casualties, they were warnings. Warnings to anyone who dared challenge the status quo. Now you see the cost of what you're doing, Hayes added, his voice almost sympathetic, as though he were trying to convince Derek to understand the futility of his mission. You can't win. No one can. We are everywhere. Every corner, every industry, every part of this world. And when you think you've found the truth, we'll make sure you're erased just like the rest of them. Derek stood there, frozen. Part of him wanted to believe Hayes, that this was all too big to defeat, too far beyond anything he could comprehend. But the other part of him, the part that had started this journey, the part that had been chasing the truth from the beginning, refused to accept that. He had come too far. He had already seen too much. You're wrong, Derek said, his voice gaining strength. I'll expose you all. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been doing, what Musk has been doing. You can't hide forever. Hayes tilted his head slightly, as though considering Derek's words. Then, his expression shifted, his smile returned, but it wasn't one of mockery this time. It was something darker, something more dangerous. Then you're already lost, Hayes said, his voice a chilling whisper. You think you're the first to try. You're just one of many. But there's something different about you, Derek. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. So I'll give you one last choice. You can walk out of here. You can leave all of this behind and live your life, or you can stay and face the consequences. But remember, if you walk away now, we won't come after you. We'll forget you ever existed. You can go back to your life. Derek's mind raced as the offer hung in the air. He could leave. He could walk away and never look back. He could take the easy path, forget everything he had learned, and continue his life, untouched by the storm brewing around him. It sounded tempting, especially after seeing the extent of what Hayes and Musk were capable of. But deep down, Derek knew that wasn't who he was. He couldn't walk away. Not when the truth was within reach. Not when so many lives had already been lost. I'm not going anywhere, Derek said firmly, his voice steady now, resolute. I'll finish this, no matter what it takes. Hayes' smile faded, his eyes narrowing as though he had been expecting this answer. So be it, he said softly, almost as if to himself. Then let's see how far you're willing to go. Derek stood in the cold, dimly lit room, staring at the screen in front of him. Hayes' words echoed in his mind like a haunting mantra. You think you're the first to try? You're just one of many. But there's something different about you, Derek. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. He swallowed hard, his breath heavy in the stillness of the warehouse. The weight of the decision he had just made, choosing to press on, to confront the truth, no matter the cost, hung like a lead weight in his chest. He wasn't just going up against Musk's empire anymore. He was now facing a shadowy network of the world's most powerful, ruthless figures who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Derek's mind raced as Hayes' final words echoed in his head. Let's see how far you're willing to go. The moment had arrived. There was no turning back now. But Derek wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He had made it this far, and even though the odds were stacked against him, especially now that Hayes had made it clear how far his influence stretched, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't walk away. Not after everything. Not after the lives lost, the countless sacrifices. The truth was more important than his own safety now. Hayes, on the other hand, remained calm, almost pleased with Derek's refusal to back down. There was an eerie stillness in his gaze, as if he were sizing Derek up, calculating his next move. I hope you understand the magnitude of what you're doing, Derek, Hayes said, his voice smooth as silk. This isn't just about you anymore. You're stepping into a war you can't win. People who try to expose us are erased from history. You'll become nothing more than a memory. You'll be forgotten. Derek didn't respond. He couldn't afford to be distracted by Hayes' mind games. Every second he spent in this room felt like it was dragging him deeper into a spider's web that was closing in on him from all sides. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a sharp reminder of the world outside this warehouse. It was Lisa. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out and answered the call. Derek, listen to me, Lisa's voice crackled through the phone, anxiety clear in her tone. I've got eyes on you. I've contacted a few people who can help, but you need to move fast. I don't know how long you can stay hidden. The security systems are being breached. They know you're here. Derek's breath caught in his throat. His mind flashed to the encrypted files he had seen just moments ago, the terrifying list of names of people who had tried to expose the network. He could feel the walls closing in, the world outside this room slipping away. They're coming, Lisa said, her voice tight with panic. Derek, you have to get out of there now. But Derek didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on Hayes, who was watching him with a calm, almost clinical expression. For a moment, Derek felt the crushing weight of the decision he had made. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to run, to survive. But in his heart, he knew that if he walked away now, everything he had fought for would be in vain. No, Derek said firmly into the phone, though his voice shook with the weight of his resolve. I'm not running. This ends tonight. I'm going to finish this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Lisa spoke again, her voice softer now, filled with a mixture of fear and admiration. I'll keep you updated, she said, her tone resigned. But Derek, don't do anything reckless. Please. Get out of there alive. Derek didn't respond. He couldn't. The moment he hung up, he placed the phone back in his pocket and turned back to face Hayes. Hayes' smile widened. You're more stubborn than I thought. I'm not afraid of you, Derek said, his voice growing steadier. And I'm not afraid of Musk. You've built your empire on lies and blood, and I'm not going to let it continue. For the first time, Hayes' demeanor shifted. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a flicker of something, anger, maybe, passed across his face. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. You really believe that, don't you? Hayes asked, his voice low and dangerous. You believe you're some kind of hero. But this isn't a movie, Derek. You're not going to ride off into the sunset, expose the evil empire. You'll be forgotten. And in the end, it'll be me who decides who lives and who dies. The weight of Hayes' words hit Derek like a punch to the gut, but he wasn't shaken. The more Hayes spoke, the more Derek realized just how deep the corruption ran. He had already lost everything, his job, his reputation, his peace of mind, but he hadn't lost his fight. And if he was going to take down Musk and the system that supported him, he had to push forward. "I'm not going to be a pawn anymore," Derek said, his voice filled with conviction. "And neither will anyone else." Hayes let out a soft chuckle, the sound cold and almost mocking. "We'll see about that." With a swift movement, Hayes reached into his coat pocket, his hand emerging with a small, silver device. Derek's instinct screamed, and he took a step back, ready for whatever was coming next. But Hayes didn't move toward him. Instead, he pressed a button on the device, and the screen on the wall flickered again. Derek's heart sank as a new image appeared on the screen, Lisa's face. "What the hell is this?" Derek growled, his pulse racing. Lisa's face was distorted by static, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. "You've made your choice," Hayes said, his voice cold and final. "And now she will pay the price." Derek's blood ran cold. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. They had Lisa. They had her in their grasp. And if Derek didn't back down, she would be the one to suffer. His mind raced, torn between his promise to her and the need to finish what he had started. But even as Hayes smirked at him, Derek knew there was no choice. He couldn't let her die. He couldn't let Hayes win. In that moment, Derek made his decision. "Let her go," Derek said, his voice steady, but filled with fury. "You can kill me, but if you touch her, I swear, I'll burn this entire network to the ground. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Hayes's eyes gleamed with interest, but he didn't lower the device. Instead, he leaned back, studying Derek, as if trying to gauge how far he would go. The tension in the room was thick, thicker than it had ever been before. The air felt heavy, charged with the electricity of the decision Derek had just made. There was no more room for fear or hesitation. This was it. The point of no return. And Derek was ready. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?